Hey guys, let's explore tonight what it might have felt like to wake up during the darkest years of the Black Plague. No textbooks, no museum walls, just you, dawn, air, and the stubborn act of staying. So, before you get comfort, now turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing ambiance. And join me in that. You awaken to a faint haze of vinegar and damp linen hanging in the corner of your modest room. The morning chill clings to stone walls, but before you step outside, you wrap a square of coarse cloth, roughly woven linen across your face. This simple mask soaked overnight in a bath of vinegar, and a common historical fact in the absence of specialized plague doctor masks, ordinary people improvised face coverings. Linen or wool squares were steeped in vinegar, believed to neutralize miasmas, the foul airs thought to carry disease, then tied over the nose and mouth. Wherever you go, neighbor, you pull the cloth snug under your chin, its acidity stinging your nose. Each breath carries a sharp bite of vinegar mingled with sweet hints of rosemary, lavender, or mint from the herbal infusion. Across town, you catch whiffs of other masks. Sage's clean smoke, crushed thyme's peppery spark, small gusts of greenery that patch together a make, yet the protection is little more than peace. You step outside barefoot on worn cobblestones. Dew soaks your soles, and the sky is still a soft gray, not quite ready for morning. There's no chirping. Birds have fled. A pair of cats dart beneath a cart, eyeing you with the same suspicion you feel for everything now. The town is quieter than yesterday. Again, you pass by an alley where someone has strung a chain of dried lemons on a hook. Supposedly, citrus fumes help clear the lungs. More likely, it's an attempt at hope. The house beside it has its shutters closed and nailed. That, too, is hope, in the form of ISO. A scholarly question floats to mind, maybe not fully formed, but persistent. Did people believe more in the ritual of protection or the science behind it? But wait, this is the 1340s. Science is a messy concept tangled in astrology, scripture, and chicken guts. Still, you wonder. You greet no one because no one is outside, except for one figure far ahead, sweeping a doorstep with a twig broom. You recognize her from 3 streets over. She wears 3 scarves and gloves made of stiffened wool. She doesn't look up. You move on. The public well is empty today. A bad sign. No water means no families sent their children, which means no families dared risk it. You decide to wait until evening to fill your jug. You're thirsty already, but thirst is easier to handle than fear. In your pocket, a clove of garlic, hard as a pebble slightly squashed. You chew it slowly, resisting the urge to wince. Medieval prevention. Garlic was sacred, or suspicious, depending on the local friar's mood that day. You reach the town square. Here the stillness feels different, not peaceful, just paused. One cart half tilted against the side of the market stall. A barrel knocked over days ago and never set upright. The bread seller's awning has collapsed. She left. Maybe fled, maybe didn't. You hear your stomach grumble and ignore it. A few pigeons clatter overhead, and your instinct is to duck. Not from fear of droppings, but because birds, like rats, now feel like signs. Symbols of something out of place. Maybe an omen. Maybe a joke delivered by the universe in feathers. You move along the edge of the square, hugging stone walls, fingers brushing cool surfaces for balance. The ground here is uneven, where graves were dug too close and the earth never quite settled. You step lightly. Ahead, the chapel. The door is open. That's unusual. You step inside. It smells of wax and faint mold. No incense today. A few candles gutter low on their wicks. One priest, young, pale eyes sunken, kneels in the corner beside a prayer book that looks older than he does. He murmurs in Latin, but you hear the words, "Deliver us," more than once. You kneel, too, not really sure what to say. You don't believe more or less than usual. But being quiet, that feels right. You touch your mask again. Still damp, still pungent. You wonder if your breath smells terrible to everyone else or if no one cares anymore. You whisper a joke under your breath. My cologne is plague-grade vinegar with top notes of time and existential dread. You almost smile. You leave before the candle dies. Outside, the breeze has picked up. You lift your cloth mask slightly to let in some air, but not too much. Breathing is a careful balance now. As you return home, you pass the baker's window. It's boarded shut. But someone has scratched a note into the wood, still alive. Check again tomorrow. You touch it lightly, a kind of solidarity, a kind of calendar, a kind of diary that says, I was here. I made it one more day. You reach your door. A candle stub waits for you inside, and a cup of something warm barley water with a pinch of mint. You wrap yourself in wool, light the wick, and settle by the fire. No firewood left, but the embers are enough. You made it through the morning. You'll rest now. Oh, and your jokes for the day, in case you're still awake. You haven't bathed in a week, but hey, neither has anyone else. That's what we call community standards. You stepped in something squishy earlier. You're just hoping it was bread. That's optimism. Your mask smells like salad dressing, and you're not even mad about it. You're doing okay. You're surviving. Even here, the sun hasn't warmed the stones yet. You rise slowly, your breath visible in the slant of early morning light, and your stomach growls with a persistence that vinegar-soaked cloth can't soothe. Breakfast, you hope. You make your way back toward the market square, where the baker's window, once so fragrant and warm, remains boarded shut. But today, someone has drawn a crude smiley face in the soot on the wood. Next to it, the same words remain scratched from yesterday still alive. Check again tomorrow. A common historical truth, food supply during the Black Death was fragile, unpredictable, and occasionally deadly. With farms abandoned, bakers fallen ill, and trade slowed to a near halt, people relied on whatever they could scavenge, store, or barter for. Bread, the medieval staple, became both a source of comfort and quiet terror. You find a stall half open near the edge of the square. The woman behind it wears 3 cloaks and a layer of worry you can see in her eyes. She nods and offers a loaf. You give her a copper coin and mutter a thank you into your mask. The bread is heavy, hard flecked with what you hope is rye. You tear a small piece. It tastes sour and dense. Your jaw works harder than usual, but the flavor, well, it's hard to be picky when everything smells faintly like vinegar and burning candles. You chew slowly, alert for that telltale bitter tang that means something's off. A sidebar that might haunt your dreams. Some medieval bread was made from contaminated rye infected with Claviceps purpurea, the ergot fungus. It could cause hallucinations, seizures, gangrene. Entire villages danced involuntarily or thought they were cursed. Historians now suspect many cases of so-called witchcraft or mass hysteria may have simply been bad bread. You remember the old rhyme, if your loaf sings and your eyes see flame, you've eaten the devil and you're to blame. You take another bite just to be sure. Still chewy, still boring, probably safe. The woman across the stall raises an eyebrow. Don't eat the end, she says. They go strange first. Noted. A scholarly debate still circles this era. Like a buzzard, did people understand food-borne illness? Well, yes and no. They didn't know bacteria, but they did recognize signs. They avoided oddly colored crusts, bread that turned green or crumbled into powder or smelled wrong. They also believed some foods trapped illness in the body like cold milk or summoned it like overripe fruit. Garlic, a miracle. Fish that stared at you wrong, into the fire it went. You walk to a low stone wall and sit cradling your precious loaf. A man walks past carrying a net of onions and a jug of ale, yes, for breakfast. In plague times, ale was safer than water, boiled and brewing, mildly alcoholic and slightly nourishing it became the drink of choice for everyone from children to monks. Another joke whispered in taverns. If it's clear, don't drink it. If it's cloudy, pray first. You tear another piece of bread and chew it alongside a pinch of salt from your pocket. Luxury. In some towns, salt became more valuable than meat. In others, black pepper was worth its weight in silver. The bread scratches your throat a little. You cough once quietly and check to see if anyone noticed. They didn't, or they pretended not to. A cough today is not just a sound, it's a signal. You rise and head down a side path where the herb seller sometimes lays out her goods. She's there today wrapped in a faded green shawl, arranging bundles of thyme and marigold. You hold up your loaf. Any way to make this more edible, you ask. She offers a pinch of dried sage. You trade for it with a handful of clean linen strips, bandages you made from old cloth. In this world, everything is currency, fabric, needles, garlic, gossip. Back at home, you warm your bread on a flat stone near the fire-sprinkled sage and imagine the life of someone who eats butter daily. You imagine royalty, or maybe just a well-fed monk. A random detail: some wealthy households kept bees during the plague not for honey, but for beeswax, to seal jars, to coat bandages, to scent masks. Sweet things became symbols of survival. A slice of honeycomb was a sign someone somewhere was still tending to life. You take another bite. The sage helps. The crust is still unforgiving, but you pretend it's toasted. You pretend a lot these days. Outside, a bell rings once. Not the alarm bell, not the death bell. Just the town's hour of sunbell. It used to signal breakfast. Now it's mostly a reminder that time still exists, even when everything feels paused. You finish the last bite slowly. A crumb falls to the floor. A mouse skitters near it. You both freeze. You decide to let it have the crumb. You've eaten. That's enough. You sit with your back to the wall, eyes closed, sun on your eyelids. The bread sits heavy in your stomach, safe, sustaining, a small victory. The bread sits heavier than you expected. Maybe it's the dense flour. Maybe it's the weight of surviving another meal. But as you lace your boots, one frayed, one patched, you know you'll need to leave the town center today. There are herbs to gather, news to hear, perhaps a breath of fresher air if the wind allows. First, though, you must pass the town gate. There's a common misconception that medieval towns were always wide open. But during plague years, walls were more than symbolic. They were checkpoints, barriers, filters for sickness. And the gates, those were tight-guarded and moody. You approach slowly, the gravel underfoot crunching as you near two men in worn leather jerkins. Each wears a strip of yellow cloth tied to one arm, the town's way of marking active duty, though no one's really sure if that means brave, healthy, or just not coughing yet. They cross their halberds as you near. Halt, one says, not a request. You lift your hands. I'm gathering thyme and marsh mint just outside the east ditch. He eyes your satchel. Anything to declare? You almost laugh. Declare what your breakfast. A half-dried sprig of sage, but you nod solemnly. Bread, linen, salt. One sprig of blessed rosemary. That last part helps. Rosemary has currency not just as seasoning, but as superstition. One of the guards steps closer and raises a bundle of dried herbs to your mask. He inhales slowly, like a sommelier sniffing a fine wine. Vinegar. You nod. He grunts and steps back. A common historical fact by the late 1340s cities across Europe had established semi-formal checkpoints to restrict movement. Venice had one of the earliest documented quarantine stations. Elsewhere, towns posted guards to prevent outsiders from bringing in the disease or insiders from fleeing it and spreading death elsewhere. You watch as the other guard checks a list nailed to the wall, ink blotched, names half-crossed. He finds yours barely legible in faded brown ink. Back before sundown, he mutters and raises the halberd. You pass through the gate, noting the grooves in the stone from carts long gone. The countryside opens before you, not lush, not wild, but quieter. It feels less watched, less wary. Still, your shoulders stay tense. You're not sure if the danger is more outside the walls or within. A scholarly debate lingers in your mind. Were these checkpoints genuinely effective? Some say yes, delaying plague spread by days, weeks, even months. Others argue that fleas didn't care about gates, and neither did rats. But fear is a builder of rituals, and these guards, these checklists, they gave the illusion of control. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to matter. You follow a narrow path toward a patch of low-growing herbs where marsh mint curls beside a shallow stream. The water glimmers faintly, but you dare not touch it. Instead, you gather what you need breathing in the cool scent that cuts through the vinegar in your mask. A nearby tree bears a crude carving, "Don't go back." You run your hand over the bark. Someone came this way and decided something. Maybe they meant the gate. Maybe they meant a house. Maybe they meant a person. On the return, a raven lands on a branch ahead. You freeze, unsure whether to interpret it as an omen or just a raven doing raven things. Either way, you whisper a quick blessing under your breath. Because why not? Near the gate again, the same two guards now lounge beneath a canopy of stretched cloth, drinking something from horn mugs. You offer them each a pinch of marsh mint. For the headaches, you say. They nod. One slips the herb into his cup. The other stares at you a beat longer, then asks, "You heard about the Southern Road?" You shake your head. "Blocked off. Too many sick in the last caravan. They're burning the wagons now." He doesn't say it with drama, just matter of fact, like the weather or the price of onions. You nod again quietly, thankful you never took that route. As you step back through the gate, the town feels smaller somehow, as if the walls have moved closer. You think of the note carved into the tree and wonder whether staying is survival or surrender. You walk past the baker's window again. Still closed, but a fresh line has been added beneath yesterday's scratched message. Still alive, bread tomorrow, you smile beneath your mask. The monastery sits just past the town's edge, where the hills begin to rise gently and the air shifts from stale to still. Its stone walls are pale gray, weathered by wind and rain, but they hold firm as if trying to outlast both time and plague. You walk toward it, satchel over your shoulder, time brushing against your hip with every step. The gate creaks open slowly, not because it's locked, but because the wood is swollen with years and prayers. You duck your head under the archway. Inside, silence. But not the heavy, doom-laden silence of the graveyard or the locked tavern door. This is a soft quiet, like wool wrapped around a bell. Somewhere within, a bird chirps, faint, hesitant. Even nature seems unsure if it should be here. A figure emerges from the shadows, robes the color of old parchment, sandals, worn thin hands, tucked neatly in his sleeves. A monk, young with a face creased from concentration rather than age. He doesn't speak, but inclines his head, motioning for you to follow. You walk together along a stone corridor where sunlight slices through narrow windows like golden knives. Dust hangs in the beams, undisturbed. You enter the cloister garden. In the center stands a tall wooden tower topped with an odd contraption, gears a suspended weight, something that ticks faintly with each second. The monk gestures upward, a common historical fact. Mechanical clocks first appeared in medieval monasteries as tools for marking prayer times. Monks lived by the bell matins, lauds, prime terce, sext, none vespers compline. In a world of chaos, clocks offered order. They didn't have dials or hands at first, just chimes. This one is different. Its soft ticking feels steady, soothing. You sit on a bench near the garden wall. The monk brings a small bowl of barley water and a few preserved quince slices. You thank him with a nod. "I've been watching time," he finally says, voice low. "It's been behaving strangely." You raise an eyebrow. Some days pass too quickly. Others take weeks. The clock doesn't lie, but we do to ourselves. We say, just one more week, and then 3 months vanish. You sip the barley water. It tastes of memory and faint wood smoke. He points to a vine creeping across the wall. "Last spring, we planted marjoram there, but the plague came too early, and the brothers couldn't tend it. It's growing now, though. Late, but not dead." You nod. A fitting metaphor, if ever there was one. A scholarly debate lingers. Did the introduction of mechanical clocks change how people felt? Time before gears and bells' time was measured in shadows and instinct. How bread rose, how dew lingered, how many verses it took to walk from one field to another. Clocks made time, regular, predictable. But during plague years, nothing was predictable. Time slipped sideways. You ask how many monks remain. 11, he replies. We were 30. He doesn't look away. The clock still rings, he adds, even for empty beds. Later, he offers to show you the scriptorium. You follow him into a cool, dim room filled with desks, ink pots, and parchment. A single candle flickers on a side table, casting trembling light over a half-finished page. He lifts a manuscript. We copy psalms, but also names now. He hands you a quill. You hesitate. There's room, he says. You lean over the page. The ink is thick, slightly gritty, made from crushed oak galls. You write carefully one name, not your own. Someone you remember from before the coughing started. He nods. Writing is an act of survival, he says. Another monk enters older, squinting against the light. He brings bread round firm, flecked with herbs. It's warm. You realize it's the first warm food you've touched in days. You sit again. The clock chimes the hour. No one flinches. Before you leave, the younger monk gives you a small token carved wood shaped like a tiny gear, a piece of the first clock they built. We make replacements, he explains, for those lost to rust. You hold it in your palm. It's smooth from handling worn by time and prayer alike. Outside, as you descend the path toward town, you realize something: the monastery didn't feel sad. Not in the way plague-sick homes do. It felt paused, preserved, like time held its breath here but didn't flee. The bell chimes again behind you, not loud, not mournful, just steady. The sun is higher now, casting narrow shadows along the cracked cobblestones as you step back into town. People move like ghosts, slow, quiet eyes down. No one lingers too long in any one spot. Even laughter, when it happens, sounds like an apology. You've started to notice a pattern in where you step: around puddles, over scorch marks, past doorsteps with red chalk symbols. But today, something else catches your eye. A rat, not scurrying, not shy, just watching. It perches on the edge of a broken barrel near the baker's boarded-up stall, its whiskers twitching, body still. For a second, it looks like it's thinking. Then, with a flick of its tail, it disappears behind the crates. You keep walking. A common historical fact, though rarely said aloud at the time, is that rats and their unwelcome passengers played a starring role in the spread of the Black Death. Modern science tells us that the plague bacterium Yersinia pestis hitched a ride in fleas, which hitched rides on rats, which hitched rides on everything else. But in the 14th century, no one blamed the rats. Not really. They were just there. But you've noticed, everyone has, and no one speaks of it. You round the corner to find a man sweeping his doorstep. He pauses as if he can feel your gaze. "Rats," you say quietly. He looks up, eyes narrowing. "Don't call him that," he says, almost spitting. "Bad luck. A superstition, maybe. Or fear wrapped in ritual. Some towns took to calling them shadow tails or night whiskers. Others pretended they weren't there at all. You move on. In a narrow lane, you see a cat. Mangy gray, one ear torn but alert. It crouches, then pounces behind a crate. A squeak. Silence. You almost applaud. A scholarly debate endures. Did people in the Middle Ages kill too many cats during the early plague years? There's evidence that superstition, especially the association of cats with witches, led to a dramatic drop in the feline population. Ironically, this may have worsened the plague by giving rats free rein. Cause and effect tangled in belief and fur. You pause to tie your sandal. Nearby, a rat squeezes under a door frame. The wood is soft and warped from moisture. You make a mental note not to stand near that house again. At the town's edge, a merchant has set up a makeshift stall. He sells oddities, charms, feathers, dried roots, a pile of carved wooden rats with little painted eyes. He calls them watchers. Protection, he says, with a smile too wide. Place one near your bed. If it falls in the night, you're next. You shake your head, but you buy one anyway. It's easier than arguing. You place it carefully in your satchel facing outward, just in case. You step into the apothecary's alley where the smell of herbs usually masks everything else. Not today. Today, the smell of something else clings to the walls, sour, warm, and wrong. The door creaks open. Inside, a woman in a deep red cloak sits cross-legged slicing dried orange peel. She glances up. Rats, she says, unprompted. They know where to go. Follow them backward, you find the dying. Follow them forward, you find the fresh. You nod. She offers you a bundle of rue. Hang it over your door. Not for the rats, for the fleas. You take it. Her fingers are stained with ink. She's been writing something, a list, a prayer, a curse. You don't ask. On your way home, you see a group of children chasing something with sticks. They laugh, shrill, chaotic, until you realize it's not a game. They've cornered a rat against a wall. It shrieks. One boy hits it hard. The laughter stops. A silence follows, thick as tar. Then one girl whispers, "We have to burn it." You turn away. Another detail from history, many believed that killing a plague-bearing animal wasn't enough. The body had to be burned. Otherwise, the spirit or the sickness would seep into the ground and find another host. You reach your street and glance at your door. You tuck the wooden rat from the merchant just inside the threshold. It wobbles but stays upright. Good enough. You sit near your window with a cup of lukewarm ale. You sip, you wait. The street is quiet. Then scuffle, skitter, pause. You look down. The real rat is back. Same one who knows. It stares at you a beat too long, then turns and vanishes. You breathe deep. Rue and rosemary, dirt and doubt. You wake before dawn, this time, not because of noise or light or hunger, but because of a dream. In it, someone in a long black cloak kept pointing at your chest with a stick over and over again, saying nothing. You couldn't move, you couldn't speak, just that silent pointing. When you blink awake, you're already sweating. You sit up, rub your face, and rewrap your mask in the morning, quiet. Today, it smells of clove and boiled wine, a new infusion you've tried. 1 part tradition, 2 parts desperation. Outside, the town still slumbers. Candles gutter behind a few windows. You step into the fog like it's a second blanket. You're heading to the edge of town today. Someone said he was coming. The doctor. Not a healer, really. Not a physician, not as we know them today, but a symbol. An attempt at knowledge wrapped in waxed linen leather and sheer drama. You reach the main road as a small crowd gathers, not a crowd, really more of a loose scattering. No one stands too close to anyone else. People line the edges of the street like stains on old paper. And then he appears, a tall figure in black robes that rustle as he moves, a wide-brimmed hat, gloves, boots that click softly with each step, and the mask. Oh, the mask. A curved beak of dark leather juts from his face like a bird halfway through a nightmare. The eyes are covered in round glass lenses that reflect nothing. The beak bobs slightly as he walks a pendulum of authority and unease. A common historical truth, plague doctors wore these iconic masks not to scare, but to protect. The beak was filled with herbs, lavender, camphor, mint, myrrh, meant to purify the air. In the age of miasmas, this was a filtered breath. a portable bouquet between you and death. He carries a stick about 2 feet long. It serves many purposes: to lift clothing without touching it, to gesture at symptoms from a distance, to gently nudge uncooperative patients into position, or perhaps to keep hope at arm's length. You step back as he nears. Everyone does. It's not disrespect, it's instinct. He stops in front of a house with a faded red mark on the door, taps once with the stick. A shutter opens. A face appears. He speaks muffled behind the mask. You can't hear the words, but the rhythm is careful like scripture. He gestures once with the stick. The face disappears. A scholarly debate exists about plague doctors. Were they effective at all? Many were hired by cities not to heal, but to record. Their real job was accounting, tallying the dead, noting symptoms, overseeing burials. A walking census taker in times of sorrow. He moves on past you now. You follow at a careful distance. He stops again, this time at a child sitting in the road. The child doesn't flinch, just stares. The doctor tilts his head slowly. The child tilts theirs in return. He kneels awkwardly. From a leather pouch, he pulls a small round object, a dried orange hollowed and filled with clove-studded herbs. He sets it in front of the child like an offering. The child nods, takes it, stands, walks away. You blink. It was strange, gentle, maybe even kind. You turn a corner and find the doctor again, this time speaking to a priest. Their silhouettes blur together in the fogged beak and robe, cowl, and cross. You imagine their conversation: medicine versus faith, steam versus spirit. You doubt they agree, but they nod all the same. As he leaves, the doctor pauses by a fountain and reaches into his pouch again. He scatters something: dried petals, powdered herbs, dust onto the water's surface. Then, without a word, he continues down the lane and vanishes behind a wooden gate. The crowd dissolves like mist. One by one, people retreat, as if his presence made them feel a little better, or a little worse. You return to your home, sit by the door, pull out your own pouch of herbs, and add a pinch more mint, just in case. The air today is thick, not just with heat, though summer has begun to press its heavy hand against the stones, but with scent. It drifts on the breeze like a stubborn memory, sharp wine, scorched wood, and something sweet you can't quite place. You follow it. Down a winding street, past shuttered homes and windows stuffed with cloth, you find a source. A line of townsfolk, few massed, weary, empty buckets into the gutters. The liquid splashes, red and sticky, running along the cobblestones like spilled ink. Wine, actual wine. A woman beside you mutters, "Better to clean the filth with blessed drink than to drink death with clean water." You watch as the crimson rivers flow, staining the edges of your shoes. A common historical practice, if a little dramatic, was the ritual cleaning of streets with alcohol or vinegar. Entire towns, from Florence to Avignon, ordered wine poured through gutters in the belief that it would wash away miasmas, cleanse the air, and appease divine judgment. It was half purification, half public spectacle. You edge closer to the central square. There great braziers have been lit. Smoke rises in curling tendrils, dark at the base, but fragrant as it stretches upward. Bundles of herbs are tossed in rosemary thyme, sage bay leaves, even dried rose petals if you're lucky. Someone adds orange peel, which crackles like tiny fireworks. This is a smoke cleansing, a warding, a prayer with flame. You cover your face as the fumes swirl around you. It's not unpleasant, just intense, earthy, astringent. One girl nearby coughs twice, then giggles as if the smell is strong enough to make her forget the reason it's here. A man strides through the smoke, wearing a cloak soaked in vinegar sleeves, tied tight a pouch of cloves around his neck. Clean air is made, he says loudly, not found. A scholarly question lingers at the edge of your thoughts. Did these rituals actually help? From a modern lens, perhaps slightly. Smoke and alcohol have some antiseptic qualities. They may have repelled fleas, covered the stench of decay, and encouraged people to stay apart. But the real medicine was the behavior they inspired: distance, caution, care. You step aside as someone rolls a barrel past. It leaks wine from a missing stave. A dog follows behind, licking at the trail. You spot two children near the fountain. They toss lavender into the basin and watch it float. One whispers, "It'll keep the shadows away." Another child brings a sprig of rue already half dried. He hesitates, then tucks it behind the fountain's stone lip like a secret offering. You sit on a low wall watching the smoke rise. The sun glints off the surface, giving it a shimmer like heat haze. From certain angles, the firelight dances through the herbs and looks almost holy. An older woman approaches and hands you a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, a small loaf, still warm, and a strip of sweet-smelling linen. "Bless your door with this," she says. "It won't stop the plague, but it'll tell the dead you tried." You nod, humbled. Sometimes kindness survives better than science. In the distance, a bell tolls. Not a death bell, this one is steadier, rhythmic. You recognize it. The town's fire watcher signaling for evening smoke to begin. Every district will now light its own brazier. The city will become a patchwork of scent and haze. On your way home, you pass the perfumer's stall, still operating, still overpriced. You glance at his table, lavender oil, rosewater, a vial of something labeled Miracle Blend. You raise an eyebrow. Lasts 3 prayers long, he claims. Guaranteed to keep spirits and stench at bay. You buy nothing, but you smile. The offer is comfort, not chemistry. You reach your home and hang the linen strip over your door. The scent is faint juniper, you think. Inside, you light your own brazier, just a small one. You toss in dried mint, a scrap of orange peel, and a sprig of thyme. Smoke curls upward. You watch it for a while, and you wonder how many of us now or then fought disease with rituals, not because we believed they'd work, but because doing something felt better than doing nothing. The air today is thick, not just with heat, though summer has begun to press its heavy hand against the stones, but with scent. It drifts on the breeze like a stubborn, memory-sharp, wine-scorched wood, and something sweet you can't quite place. You follow it down a winding street, past shuttered homes and windows stuffed with cloth. You find the source. A line of townsfolk, few masked, weary, empty buckets into the gutters. The liquid splashes, red and sticky, running along the cobblestones like spilled ink. Wine. Actual wine. A woman beside you mutters, "Better to clean the filth with blessed drink than to drink death with clean water." You watch as the crimson rivers flow, staining the edges of your shoes. A common historical practice, if a little dramatic, was the ritual cleaning of streets with alcohol or vinegar. Entire towns from Florence to Avignon ordered wine poured through gutters in the belief that it would wash away miasmas, cleanse the air, and appease divine judgment. It was half purification, half public spectacle. You edge closer to the central square. There great braziers have been lit. Smoke rises in curling tendrils, dark at the base but fragrant as it stretches upward. Bundles of herbs are tossed in rosemary, thyme, sage bay leaves, even dried rose petals if you're lucky. Someone adds orange peel, which crackles like tiny fireworks. This is a smoke cleansing, a warding, a prayer with flame. You cover your face as the fumes swirl around you. It's not unpleasant, just intense. Earthy, astringent. One girl nearby coughs twice, then giggles as if the smell is strong enough to make her forget the reason it's here. A man strides through the smoke, wearing a cloak soaked in vinegar sleeves, tied tight, a pouch of cloves around his neck. Clean air is made, he says, loudly not found. A scholarly question lingers at the edge of your thoughts. Did these rituals actually help? From a modern lens, perhaps slightly. Smoke and alcohol have some antiseptic qualities. They may have repelled fleas, covered the stench of decay, and encouraged people to stay apart. But the real medicine was the behavior they inspired: distance, caution, care. You step aside as someone rolls a barrel past. It leaks wine from a missing stave. A dog follows behind, licking at the trail. You spot two children near the fountain. They toss lavender into the basin and watch it float. One whispers, "It'll keep the shadows away." Another child brings a sprig of rue already half dried. He hesitates, then tucks it behind the fountain's stone lip like a secret offering. You sit on a low wall, watching the smoke rise. The sun glints off the surface, giving it a shimmer like heat haze. From certain angles, the firelight dances through the herbs and looks almost holy. An older woman approaches and hands you a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside a small loaf, still warm, and a strip of sweet-smelling linen. "Bless your door with this," she says. "It won't stop the plague, but it'll tell the dead you tried." You nod, humbled. Sometimes kindness survives better than science. In the distance, a bell tolls. Not a death bell. This one is steadier, rhythmic. You recognize it. The town's fire watcher signaling for evening smoke to begin. Every district will now light its own brazier. The city will become a patchwork of scent and haze. On your way home, you pass the perfumer's stall, still operating, still overpriced. You glance at his table, lavender oil, rose water, a vial of something labeled Miracle Blend. You raise an eyebrow. Lasts 3 prayers long, he claims. Guaranteed to keep spirits and stench at bay. You buy nothing, but you smile. The offer is comfort, not chemistry. You reach your home and hang the linen strip over your door. The scent is faint juniper, you think. Inside, you light your own brazier, just a small one. You toss in dried mint, a scrap of orange peel, and a sprig of thyme. Smoke curls upward. You watch it for a while, and you wonder how many of us now or then fought disease with rituals, not because we believed they'd work, but because doing something felt better than doing nothing. Tonight, the wind carries more than dust. It slips through alleys, beneath doors, into the folds of your sleeves. It hums against the shutters and draws soft whistles from cracked roof tiles. You stand in your doorway, bundled in your thickest wool, watching the stars blink between passing clouds. There's movement at the far end of your lane, slow, careful, burdened. A cart pushed by two figures. You recognize them. One is Sister Amara, the other. A boy you only know as Joan, though you're fairly sure he wasn't born with that name. Neither wears armor, only courage. You step down into the street, quietly falling into step behind them. The cart's wooden wheels thump in soft rhythm against the cobblestones. Inside, linen-wrapped bundles, not lifeless but close. You recognize the soft moans, the stifled coughs. They're moving the sick, not to a hospital, there are none now, but to the old candle-making hall. It's been cleared out and lined with straw. No one makes candles anymore, not with wax so hard to come by, but the space is clean, dry, and open. You reach the building and push open the crooked double doors. Inside, the scent of rosemary and sweat hits you like a quiet wall. Beds, if you can call them that, line the walls, straw mats, folded cloth, bundles of rags. Each holds someone fading, fighting, or barely waking. A common historical fact during the plague care centers were often improvised from churches, warehouses, or large homes. The wealthy fled. The poor stayed and helped each other. Medical knowledge was limited, no antibiotics, no understanding of germs, but compassion filled the gaps. Sometimes you pull on your gloves, waxed linen, stiff-yellowed, creased like old paper. They don't fit well. Your fingers slide oddly, but they keep a barrier between your hands and what comes next. The first patient is a young woman, cheeks flushed in fever. You press a damp cloth to her forehead. Her eyes flutter open. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Next is an older man with shallow breath. You lift his hand, counting pulse beats by instinct, not knowledge. His skin is cool, not a good sign. A priest kneels nearby, murmuring soft prayers. Occasionally, he offers water. Occasionally, he cries. In one corner, a woman hums. You think it's a lullaby? Her child sleeps beside her, wrapped in a torn cloak. The child twitches now and then, dreaming perhaps. You hope it's a good one. You unwrap a bundle of dried herbs, lavender and chamomile. You scatter them across the floor, then pour boiled wine into a bowl and set it near a window. Vapors rise thin but fragrant. Whether it heals or not, it smells of intention. A scholarly question stirs: did healing in plague times rely more on treatment or presence? Some scholars argue the mere act of care extended life. Others say it hastened death through exposure. But the truth, it probably did both. And still, they stayed. You notice a young man trembling in a corner, hands clenched, eyes wide. He hasn't been touched since yesterday. Not because he's contagious, though he may be, but because fear is also a barrier. You sit beside him, gloved hand resting lightly on his shoulder. He flinches, then breathes. You don't speak. You don't need to. Hours pass in flickering candlelight. A baby wails, once then falls silent. Someone sings an old hymn. It's out of tune and beautiful for it. You remove your gloves carefully, turning them inside out, placing them in the vinegar basin. Your hands are raw underneath. You rub them with rosemary oil, not because it will help, but because the scent is something to hold on to. As you leave, Joan offers you a piece of bread, torn from a common loaf. You take it. It's still warm. You nod your thanks. Outside, the stars are dimmer. Or maybe you're just tired. You walk home slowly. Your hands still remember the weight of fevered limbs. Your sleeves still carry the scent of boiled wine and waxed linen. You feel something heavy settle into your chest. Not illness, just the closeness of things. The graveyard lies beyond the southern wall, past a grove of stunted trees and a low rise that once held summer picnics. That feels like another world now, one where laughter didn't echo against silence quite so loudly. You follow the path in the early light, your boots softened by dew and the hush of a new day that doesn't feel new at all. Ahead, the wooden gate creaks open. No lock. Just a thick rope looped around the post to keep curious animals or restless humans out. Inside, the ground is uneven, not from age or roots or erosion, from burial. Too much burial, too fast. You pass crosses set at odd angles, some barely taller than weeds. Others are plain stones with no names, just marks carved by calloused hands in borrowed time. Some don't have markers at all. A common historical fact: when death came in waves, graves came in layers. Bodies laid atop bodies, sometimes wrapped, sometimes not. Cities dug long trenches, plague pits, and later returned to exhume sort and start again. London, Paris, Avignon, all left behind these silent mosaics of humanity. You kneel beside a half-filled pit. The gravedigger is already there, older, his hair gone to gray, his gloves slick with mud and something deeper. He doesn't flinch when you join him, just nods. He lifts a length of cloth. Torn linen, dusty with clay and time. Beneath it, bone, a small skull jaw missing, femurs crossed neatly. Someone took care. Even now, you reach for a basket, the kind used for carrying vegetables, now repurposed for what's left of lives. You begin to sort gently. One rib, two, a curve of hip. You place each piece with the attention you'd give glass. A scholarly question hums: were these reburials for respect or necessity? Historians argue both. Some see reverence in the rituals, the prayers whispered, the herbs scattered. Others note the overcrowding, the smell, the pressure to make space. Still, even when rushed, someone whispered a name, even if forgotten now. The priest arrives, robes damp from morning mist. He kneels beside a shallow grave and murmurs the same words he said 1,000 times. They don't sound tired. They sound worn, like a path pressed into earth by familiar feet. He sprinkles a pinch of salt over the bones, a pinch of ash. Then rosemary, always rosemary. You glance around. No mourners today, no ceremony, just the dig, the sort, the whisper. Another bundle arrives, this one heavier. You help unwrap it. Inside, a man, perhaps 30. Eyes closed, mouth slack. His hands are bound with twine, not from malice, but from care, to keep the limbs from slipping loose before burial. You adjust them gently. You help lower the body in. The gravedigger tosses in 3 herbs. A practiced flick of the wrist. For breath, he mutters. For sleep, for memory, you nod. You return to the baskets. Among the next pile, a child's doll. Straw with bits of blue thread for eyes, one arm missing. You place it in the grave with the rest. The priest sees, says nothing. Later, you help cover the pit, not with a shovel, no, with your hands. The soil is cool, clumpy, forgiving. You press it down gently, like tucking someone in for sleep. You sit for a moment after resting on your heels. The grave digger offers you water from a dented flask. It tastes of tin and mint. He speaks, finally. Saw a man bury himself once, he says. Said no one else would care enough to do it right. You say nothing. What is there to say? He continues. I gave him a proper grave later. Moved the stones, lit a candle, didn't tell anyone. You nod. That night, you return to your small room. Your gloves hang by the window stiff with soil. You lie down slowly. Bones ache. Heart aches. But you light a candle and place a sprig of rosemary on your windowsill. For breath, for sleep, for memory. You hear the rumor long before you see him. It comes in quiet waves, whispered between bundled neighbors and passed over baskets of onions like contraband gossip. They say someone's been digging at night, not to bury but to take. Not food, not firewood. Jewelry, coins, buttons made of bone and brass from the dead. You don't believe it, not at first. Who would risk so much for so little? But tonight, curiosity walks faster than fear. You wait until the bells have rung compline, until the last flicker of light disappears behind shuttered windows, and then you follow the shadow. A narrow alley, a low wall. Beyond it, the burial field still damp from last week's rain. There by the edge of the new trench, a figure crouches. No cloak, no gloves, just dirt under the nails and a sack over one shoulder. You step lightly across the grass as soft and dangerous as breath. Don't you say. He doesn't startle. Why not? He replies. They don't need it. A common historical fact, looting the dead, was not rare during the plague years. In some cities, guards were posted not to protect the living, but to prevent robbers from stripping valuables off the recently buried wedding rings, amulets, silver crucifixes, even boots, anything that could be pawned or sold. The man glances at you. His face is young, but already shaped by too many choices made too quickly. His eyes are not cruel, just tired and sharp. They buried him with this, he says, holding up a small brooch. Do you know what this feeds bread for 4 days? Oil for 2 lamps, a week's worth of lies. You hesitate. Do you bury them, you ask? He shrugs. I put them back. Mostly, the ground doesn't complain. You sit not close, but within earshot. He continues, work in hands practiced. A twist of cloth, a glint of copper, a quick return of earth. You wonder, is this desecration or adaptation? History rarely offers clean answers. A scholarly debate follows this subject. Like a shadow, was grave robbing an act of survival or sacrilege? Contemporary records call it theft. But in between the ink, you see the silences where churches quietly re-sanctified disturbed ground and villages pretended not to notice when a ring vanished. You speak again. Aren't you afraid? He laughs soft and sharp. Of what ghosts, disease, judgment? He pulls a bottle from his coat, spirits harsh and sour, and takes a long swig. Already saw my mother buried in a sheet too thin for winter. Already watched my brother walk into the woods and not come back. What's left to be afraid of? You don't have an answer. He pulls a small cross from another bundle and tucks it gently into his pocket. Then, without flourish, he pulls the cloth back over the body's face. At least he's not careless. He stands brushing off his knees. You notice he walks with a limp. Don't tell the priest, he says. He's got enough guilt. Then he vanishes as quietly as he came, slipping through the field like wind in tall grass. You stay behind a moment longer. You peer into the shallow hole. It's tidy, not desecrated, not reverent, just human. You whisper a few words. You don't know if they're a prayer. Then you too leave. Back home, you sit beside your candle. You open your pouch and pull out a small item, a brass button you found days ago. You'd meant to return it, but you kept it, a reminder you told yourself. Now, you place it on your windowsill, a gift or a confession. The wind changes before the whispers begin. It comes sharper today, tugging at door hinges and slipping under thresholds. Even the cats seem to feel it, vanishing into alleys, curling under carts, watching from shadows. Something is wrong. You hear the bell first, not the steady toll of the priest's hand, not the distant chime from the monastery clock. This bell rings fast, urgent, then stops, then starts again. You step into the street, tightening your cloak, looking for the source. And you notice what's missing. Children, no singing, no skipping stones in the gutter, no wooden hoops rolling down the lane, just quiet, too quiet, a silence that echoes. You follow the sound of the bell. In the market square, a small crowd has gathered. People stand apart, still masked, still cautious, but drawn by a common pull worry shaped like absence. A woman sobs softly into her apron. Her husband wrings his hands, eyes darting toward every alley. Another man speaks in low tones to the town bailiff. No shouting, just tension thick enough to press into your ribs. Someone leans toward you. They're gone, she whispers. 4 of them. 2 from the baker's lane, 1 from the well path, and the little girl who sells rosemary. You remember her, big eyes, chipped teeth, always barefoot. You try to speak, don't manage it. A common historical detail, often hidden behind more dramatic tales of plague and fire children, vanished. Some wandered off, chasing rumors of safe places. Others followed older siblings into the woods, seeking parents who'd been taken away. A few were taken by those who believed them untouched, and thus holy or useful for desperate, misguided cures. You join the quiet search. No one organizes it. There are no whistles, just small knots of people peeling off into lanes, calling names through muffled cloth. You check the old barn, the herb seller's shed, the bell tower steps. Nothing until you find something by the edge of the abandoned churchyard. A small shoe, not hidden, not dropped, just placed as if it had been set down on purpose. You kneel beside it. The leather is soft, the sole worn thin. Inside is a scrap of lavender. You look up. The door to the church is ajar. You hesitate. A scholarly question forms uninvited. Did the fear of plague drive communities to imagine threats where none existed? Or did the collapse of social structure allow old fears to re-emerge? Fear of curses, of witches, of changelings. You push the door open gently. The air inside is cold, still heavy with incense from another time. Dust motes swirl in the dim light. At the far end behind the altar, you hear breathing, soft, uneven. You step carefully, and there, huddled beneath a faded tapestry, are 3 children. One clutches a doll made of straw. Another holds a sprig of rosemary like a sword. The third simply watches you with wide, unreadable eyes. They don't run. You kneel. We were hiding, the smallest one says. From what? He shrugs. The air, the rats, the man with the stick. You understand. All of it. You sit down. Not too close, just enough. Can I sit with you a moment? You ask. They nod. You stay there a while. No one speaks. Outside, the bell rings again. Finally, the eldest stands. "We should go back," she says. So, you walk with them. Through the doors, across the yard, into the lane. The bell stops when the crowd sees you. Eyes widen. Tears return, but this time they come with motion. Arms reach. Voices break. Names are whispered like spells. You stand aside as the children are wrapped in blankets, lifted gently, held fiercely. Someone touches your shoulder. You nod. Then you walk home. The shoe still in your hand. The dirt under your fingernails is beginning to tell stories. Stories of graves, of herbs, of cracked stones, and too many quiet hands. So today you decide to wash, not because it will save you, but because it might remind you who you are underneath all this dust. You walk to the communal trough before dawn while the air is still cool and the shadows haven't decided what shape they'll take. The water glistens faintly in the low light, catching the last of the moon and the first of the morning. It smells faintly of smoke. A bucket rests nearby, half filled with pale gray lumps. Soap, sort of. A common historical fact. Medieval soap was often made from ashes and animal fat, boiled, strained, cooled, and cut into rough chunks. It smelled sharp. It felt gritty. And if you were lucky, it only stung a little. You select the least suspicious-looking piece, kneel by the trough, and begin. The lather is weak but determined. You scrub your arms, your fingers, your face. The sensation is strange, not refreshing exactly, but necessary. Like clearing fog from a mirror you haven't looked into for weeks. Your skin prickles. Behind you, a voice rings out, not sharp, not angry, measured. It's the friar. He stands at the edge of the square robes, tidy voice carrying with the weight of habit and repetition. He's giving a sermon to no one in particular. You pause, dripping half clean, half listening. Plague, he says, is not punishment. It is invitation. You raise an eyebrow to what someone calls from a window. To remember, he replies. To repent, to return. You squeeze the soap tighter. A scholarly debate circles sermons from this time like a cloud of incense. Were they meant to heal or to frighten? Some were fire and brimstone, repent or perish. Others were gentler, offering comfort in ritual, even if the theology was questionable. You wrap your arms in a cloth and walk closer. The friar stands beside a makeshift altar, a table draped with linen weighed down by stones. A wooden cross leans gently tilted like a tired head. He reads from memory, "Though I walk through the valley." Someone behind you whispers, "We've been walking that valley for months." You don't disagree. The friar finishes his reading. Then something unexpected. He pulls a basin from beneath the table, fills it with water from the well, crushes a dried sprig of marjoram between his palms, and drops it in. He gestures. Wash. One by one, people step forward, not to drink, not to bless, just to dip their hands, not even fully. A touch, a swirl, a pause. You step up. The water is cool. The herbs float like tired boats. You lower your fingers, hold them still, and lift them out again. Not a cure, not a miracle, but something. You nod once. As you leave, the friar presses a cloth into your hand. For your face, he says. It's soft. You walk back past the old bakery. The soot marks still remain. The door is slightly open now. A hopeful sign. Maybe. You think of the soap, the sting. the clean that wasn't clean but was still better than nothing. You think of the friar's words, invitation, return. You wonder what you'd return to if given the choice. You reach your home and hang the cloth by the door. It flutters in the morning breeze, a signal to yourself. Not done, but trying. Night doesn't fall anymore. It settles slow and deliberate, like a blanket folded corner by corner, careful not to wake whoever's beneath it. Tonight, there's a hush, deeper than usual. You feel it before the shadows deepen, before the stars blink awake. The air is too still. Even the usual night sounds, owls, carts, coughs, hold back. Inside, you light a candle. One of your last. Its flame stutters, then steadies, casting a soft glow against the stone wall. The room feels smaller in this light, like everything draws closer when the world gets dark. You place a circle of salt around the base of the candle, not for flavor, for safety. A common historical practice, though more whispered than written, salt circles were used for protection, not just against rats or bad luck, but against dreams, against spirits, against whatever else might drift in when the doors were closed and the windows latched. You've done this for 3 nights now. You're not sure if it works, but the candle hasn't gone out yet. You sit on your straw mat and press your back against the wall. You tuck your knees to your chest, wrap the blanket around your shoulders, and wait. Outside, a dog howls, then nothing. A footstep, no, just the wood shifting in the rafters. Probably. You glance at the candle, still burning. You close your eyes. Sleep doesn't come gently these days. It waits behind a curtain of memory and noise, filtering through slowly like light through stained glass. When it finally does arrive, it brings dreams. Tonight, you walk through fog. Familiar shapes, half-formed faces, streets, doorways. You see the friar standing ankle-deep in a pool of ink. He's writing with both hands, but the parchment burns behind him. You try to speak, but your voice is full of rosemary. Then a child's laugh, distant, twisting. You turn. The church is there again. The door swings open. Inside, rows of candles, floating weightless, drifting like stars underwater. One winks out, then another. You reach for them, but your hand passes through. You wake. The candle is still burning beside you, the salt still intact. A relief, a question lingers. Were dreams during plague years a form of medicine or a symptom? A scholarly curiosity, many plague-era journals where they exist mention strange visions, dreams of birds with human voices, of rivers made of ash, of doorways that wouldn't open. Some claimed these dreams were signs, others called them curses. Some just the mind making maps out of chaos. You sit up blinking sleep from your eyes. On your windowsill, the brass button catches a glint of moonlight. You reach for your notebook, a few pages tied with string, and record the dream, not for meaning, for memory. You add one line more, salt, still held. You stand and check the windows, still latched, the door still bolted. Outside, faint candlelight glows in a few other windows, small islands in a sea of dark. It's enough. You step outside before dawn, wrapped in your thickest cloak, your hands still warm from the candle's last breath. The air tastes metallic like iron, or maybe anticipation, and the sky is the kind of black that makes everything else feel too quiet. You didn't mean to wake this early. Something just nudged you, a feeling, a sound that wasn't a sound. You look up. And then you see it. A streak of light, fast, bright, gone. A star fallen across the sky like a finger dragged through ink. Someone nearby gasps. You weren't the only one watching. From windows, cracks and shutters, rooftops and street corners, others had looked up too. No one speaks. Everyone saw it. Everyone is wondering the same thing. What does it mean? A common historical fact, comets and shooting stars were interpreted in the Middle Ages not as celestial events, but as messages, warnings, omens. A star that moves isn't just astronomy. It's a whisper from God or fate or something older than both. You lean against a wall watching the sky as it fades back into stillness. A child's voice breaks the silence. It was going toward the hill. Someone mutters, "That's where the graves are." Another replies, "No, it means the worst has already passed." Someone else says, "It means the next wave is coming." And just like that, the moment fractures into a dozen meanings, like light through glass. You stay quiet. The friar appears, robes askew, sandals, damp with dew. He raises his hands, not in blessing, but in acknowledgement. "Yes," he says, "we saw it." A scholarly debate still flickers in books about the Black Death. How much of that era's behavior was driven by science and how much by symbolism, stars, eclipses, weather? Everything was read like scripture. A cold summer, a warning, a blood-red moon, a reckoning, a falling star, a crossroads. You walk slowly to the edge of town, toward the small rise where the bell ringer once paused. From there, you can see the church steeple, the graveyard, and beyond that, a hint of the river. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the sky is beginning to shift one shade lighter at a time. Someone has placed a single candle at the top of the hill. It's already half melted, flickering weakly against the breeze. You stand beside it. Someone else approaches an older woman carrying a cloth bundle. She places it gently on the ground, bread and herb sprig, and a smooth stone. "For luck," she says. "For who?" she shrugs. "Anyone." You add your own offering, the rosemary you carried from the sick house. It's dry now, brittle, but it smells like memory. The woman looks up. "Do you believe in signs? You consider the question. You believe in bread, in salt, in cloth soaked in vinegar. You believe in lighting a candle and hoping it lasts till morning. You believe in the sound of footsteps returning when you feared silence. So maybe yes. Yes, you say softly. I think I do." Back in the square, the town begins to stir. Someone sweeps a doorway. Someone else lights a brazier. The sound of a cough followed by a laugh. Small signs, normal ones. And above it all, the memory of a star that burned, crossed the sky, and vanished, leaving meaning in its wake like footprints in snow. You don't notice it at first. It's the smell that gives it away. Not rot, not smoke, but fresh-cut wood and damp clay. A scent that doesn't belong to decay, but to intention. You follow it down the lane where shutters stay closed and every knock echoes too loudly. And then you see it. A door, boarded shut from the inside. Planks nailed across the frame in a crooked grid reinforced with rope and iron nails. Not hastily, deliberately. Each board aligned, measured. There's even a small hole left near eye level covered with cloth. Someone thought this through. Someone doesn't want to come out, or doesn't want anything else to come in. A neighbor stands nearby, arms crossed. She nods toward the door. Been that way 3 days? She says. Anyone check inside, you ask? She shrugs. They speak sometimes, late at night. Prayers, maybe arguments. You walk closer. The boards are sturdy. You knock gently 3 taps. Polite. Silence. Then a voice thin as thread. Please, leave us be. It's a young man's voice. Tired. Not angry, just finished. A common historical pattern. Fear led to seclusion. Families would wall themselves in during the plague, hoping to outlast the sickness. Some survived. Many didn't. Their homes were later unsealed, sometimes with the bodies still seated at tables, food untouched, prayers half whispered into silence. You rest your hand against the wood. Do you have food, you ask? A pause. Then, yes. Water. A longer pause. Then, enough. You glance at the small cloth-covered hole. You'll need light, you say. A faint laugh. We don't need to see anymore. You sit on the stoop, not because they asked, because you want to. You pull out a crust of bread and a small tin of oil. You set it gently near the door, not because they'll take it, because maybe they'll know someone still remembers. The neighbor watches. I used to see them at market, she murmurs. He played a flute. She sold figs. Now they board up their door with the same hands that once offered sweetness. A scholarly question lingers: is isolation an act of preservation or surrender? Some medieval records paint these families as brave, choosing solitude over risk. Others call them selfish, shutting out community when it was needed most. But maybe it was neither. Maybe it was just another way of hoping. The next night, the boards are still there, but your oil tin is gone. The bread remains. You add a blanket, this time folded, clean. Still no words. Still no light. On the 3rd night, a new sound. Music, faint from within. A flute, tentative, haunting. A melody with no name, played as though the notes themselves are remembering something for the first time in weeks. You sit on the stoop and listen, and though no one speaks, the door feels a little less closed. You wake to the scent of smoke and rosemary again. It's comforting in its way, like the scratch of an old blanket or the sound of a familiar voice. But your supply of herbs is thinning, and the candle you lit last night has melted into a waxy puddle beside the hearth. You need more, so you head to the apothecary. Not the tidy one by the chapel with labeled jars and quiet prayers. That place closed weeks ago, its sign now hanging lopsided and weather-worn. No, the one still open is in the back of the alley near the fishmonger, through a crooked door that sticks up 3 steps that creak like old bones. You push the door open. Inside, the smell hits you first. Not bad, just dense. A mix of herb smoke dust and something vaguely sour. You blink through the haze and step carefully past hanging bundles of drying nettle and garlic. A voice floats from behind a curtain. If you got a cough, don't breathe too loud. I'm just here for sage and vinegar, you say. A woman appears, short wrapped in shawls, eyes sharp as frost. She carries a clay pot in one hand, stained with something that smells suspiciously like boiled honey and ash. I'm out of sage, she replies, but I have something better. You raise an eyebrow. She lifts a small pouch from behind the counter and opens it. The smell is not good. She grins. Pigeon droppings. You take a step back. It's for compresses, she explains, when mixed with vinegar and clove oil. Very traditional. A common historical fact in plague-era medicine, nothing was too strange to be considered helpful. Dried dung of various types was often mixed into poultices, especially when paired with wine resin or vinegar. Some believed it drew out sickness. Others just hoped it did something. She sets the pouch on the counter. You want it or not? You hesitate. I also have ground amber waxed garlic skins, dried lizard tail. Just the vinegar, you say? She shrugs. No imagination. You glance around while she pours the vinegar, thick and cloudy, into a glass vial. The shelves are cluttered with oddities, bundles of charred hair, crushed beetles, chipped stones with chalk markings. A dried toad rests in a small bowl. Possibly decorative? People still come, you ask. More than ever, she says. No one trusts priests anymore? Not really. And monks only have prayers. I've got options. A scholarly aside, apothecaries operated in a gray zone. Not doctors, not priests, not quite healers, but somewhere between science and suspicion. They mixed remedies, collected folk cures, and dabbled in superstition. Some saved lives, others didn't. You glance at a jar labeled Smoke of the Moon. What's in that, you ask? She smiles. Whatever you need it to be. You pay in linen strips and 2 cloves of garlic. She tosses in a small sprig of marjoram for loyalty and a wink you don't entirely trust. As you turn to leave, she adds, if you change your mind, I'll keep the droppings fresh for you. Back outside, the air feels thinner. You breathe deeply, sage or no sage, and walk slowly through the square. A boy runs past, carrying a bundle of mint. A woman calls after him, scolding. The baker's door is open just a crack, and someone has chalked a star on the church's wall, 6-pointed with a circle around it. Protection, perhaps, or declaration. You pass by your neighbor's door, the one with the boards. No music tonight. But a candle flickers faintly behind the cloth-covered peephole. Still there. At home, you uncork the vinegar and soak a strip of cloth. The scent is sharp cleansing. You hang it over the door frame and place the marjoram by the window. You did not take the pigeon droppings, but you kind of wish you had. It starts with a single note. You're lying still half asleep when it slips in through your open window, low warm, held longer than necessary. Then another follows, dancing over rooftops like a candle's flicker. You sit up slowly, not afraid, just curious. Music, real music, not a flute echoing from behind a boarded door, not the hollow hum of grief. This is bolder, brighter. You pull your cloak around you and step into the hallway. Others are already peering out, faces in doorways, silent as breath. No one speaks, but everyone is thinking the same thing. Is that a lute? You make your way toward the courtyard, the one behind the bakery, flanked by weathered walls and trailing ivy. By the time you arrive, the music is fuller. A stringed instrument, yes, but joined now by voice. A woman's voice, lilting and soft, almost too gentle for this world. She sings in a dialect you have no words lost, but meaning clear. Something about longing, about memory, about waiting. In the center of the courtyard stands a man with the lute, his fingers worn and fast eyes closed as he plays. Beside him sits the singer, hair braided with rosemary sleeves, rolled up, face lined, but lit from within. She sings like she's trying to remember what it means to be alive. You take a seat on a low stone bench beside a tanner's apprentice. He doesn't look at you, just nods. You listen. A common historical truth during the height of plague music didn't vanish. In fact, it often bloomed. From behind closed doors and hidden corners, even in plague houses, music became both rebellion and comfort. Traveling musicians defied bans. Townspeople sang dirges and dances alike. Sound, after all, didn't carry disease. It only carried memory. As the song finishes, no one claps. Instead, someone sighs. Then the man with the lute speaks. We play, he says, because silence forgets. And we remember. He strums again, faster this time, and the courtyard shifts. A boy taps his foot. A baker's daughter spins once awkwardly, then laughs. You smile without meaning to, and suddenly there's motion, a kind of dance, not elegant, but full of feeling. A mismatched rhythm of boots and bare feet, skirts twirling, hands waving. No contact, just closeness. You catch the edge of the melody. It's familiar, but not from a songbook. Maybe something you heard as a child or once on a road far from here. Or maybe it's new and just feels old, like it's been waiting for this moment. Someone brings bread. Someone else pours wine into clay cups. The lute player doesn't stop, not even when a string snaps. He retunes mid-song, laughing under his breath. The woman beside him begins a different song, this one cheekier, with sly glances and shoulder rolls. People chuckle, a baby giggles. Even the priest appears standing quietly in the archway. No sermon, just listening. A scholarly observation. Despite bans and superstitions, communal gatherings during plague years happened often, especially at night, in hidden courtyards or forest clearings. They defied curfews and preached joy through rhythm. Whether as distraction, protest, or healing dance and music were persistent human answers to unrelenting fear. Tonight, that answer hums through every stone in the square. The song slows. The singer's voice fades. The lute's final note lingers like the tale of a dream. You stay seated even as others begin to drift away. No one wants to be the first to break the spell. The lute player bows, then packs his instrument, gently wrapping it in cloth. He meets your gaze for a second, just long enough to nod. Not as performer to audience, as one survivor to another. You return home under stars that seem a little closer than before. And just as you're about to close your window, someone hums the tune again, somewhere on a rooftop or behind another wall. It carries. It always does. You're awakened by an unfamiliar sound. Not coughing, not bells, not music. It's the river, except it's not where it used to be. You throw on your cloak and step outside. The path that once led to a modest stream now opens into a flooded lane, glittering in morning light. Water laps against doorsteps and barrels. Ducks float past your neighbor's herb cart like they've claimed the market square for themselves. Someone shouts, "It's changed its path." Overnight, you follow the voices to the embankment where others have gathered. Sure enough, the river, once a sluggish gray ribbon tucked behind the mill, has veered, carving a brand new channel. Through the village's edge, like a drunken god dragging a stick through wet sand. No storm, no rain, just change. A common historical fact across Europe in the 14th century, climate fluctuations, especially during the Little Ice Age, altered river patterns in dramatic ways. Some shifted slowly over decades. Others, like tonight, seemed to change in a single breath. These events, though, rare upended trade, ruined crops, and occasionally swallowed entire streets. An older man squats beside a barrel floating aimlessly. "That was my potato store," he says quietly. Then he sighs. "Well, not anymore." A priest mutters something about divine punishment. A woman selling leeks gives him a look. Another adds, "Or maybe the river just got tired of the same route. Don't we all?" You step carefully into the shallows. The cold bites your ankles through your boots, but you want to see where it's headed. Down past the millstone, the water churns in places it never touched before. Stones shimmer beneath the surface newly exposed. You spot pottery fragments, a rusted horseshoe. The past always finds its way to the present when water moves. Someone brings out sandbags remnants from another year, another threat. A boy uses his cloak to try and redirect the flow with the earnestness of someone who thinks cloth can stop rivers. A scholar near you muses aloud. There's a theory that the plague combined with shifts in agriculture and river courses altered entire city layouts. Trade routes died, new ones bloomed, all because water decided to have a whim. It sounds ridiculous, but the water keeps moving. You walk downstream. A group of villagers is digging hastily, building up a wall of broken wood and earth. Children carry stones. Even the baker shows up flour still on his sleeves. It's not panic, it's choreography. Like everyone suddenly knows what to do when the earth rewrites itself. You join them, dig a little, haul, pat the earth down. Your fingers are numb, but you keep going. Because if the river can move, so can you. By midday, a new path is emerging, stones channeling flow mounds, guiding it back toward the old stream bed. It might not last, but maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe the point is trying. You pause to drink from a shared ladle. It tastes like copper and dirt, but it's clean. Someone nearby laughs. At least the fish are having a good day. You glance back toward the flooded alley. The ducks are still floating past the herb cart. One's perched on a wheel, now preening like it owns the place. A strange detail. From the mud, a carved bone comb unearthed from a collapsed bank. It's delicate, still smooth, still stained with rose oil. Probably from a merchant's wife, or a musician, or a child who once braided her hair and forgot to take it inside. You pocket it, a reminder that things wash back up eventually. A small academic question with sudden river changes seen as omens or just bad luck. Contemporary chroniclers often debated whether nature's oddities were signs of divine will or random mischief. Some believed in punishments, others in portents, and still others simply in cause and effect. I smelled earth shifts erosion. No one really agreed, and perhaps that was the point. By evening, the water has calmed. The makeshift channel holds for now. People begin to drift home soaked and filthy, but strangely lighthearted. A girl skips over stones in the shallows. The man with the lost potato store shrugs and offers to host a stew with whatever didn't float away. And as you step back onto dry ground, the comb still in your hand, you feel the world turn just a little differently than it did the day before. Because rivers change, but so do we. You return to the market square after a night of rain, expecting mud silence, and perhaps a few brave vendors hoping for customers despite the mess. But one figure is already there. She always is, the candle seller. She stands behind a crooked stall patched with linen scraps and old paper, her wares arranged with near sacred precision. Tall tapers, squat votives, beeswax sticks wrapped in twine. Every candle glows softly as if it has its own heartbeat. You've seen her every day, rain or shine, plague or calm. No one remembers when she arrived. She doesn't shout or barter like the others. She just stands, hands folded, waiting. Today, curiosity outweighs routine. You step closer. The scent of beeswax and lavender greets you warm and gentle. A breath of light in gray air. She nods once without speaking and gestures to her display. You pick up a slender candle, pale perfectly smooth. Its base is stamped with a tiny impression, a six-pointed star within a circle. You don't recognize it. She says, "That one's for memory," helps you hold on. Her voice is raspy, not unkind, like parchment left too long in the sun. You raise an eyebrow. Memory. She shrugs. What else is there to keep? A common historical fact in many plague-struck cities, candles weren't just for light, they were symbols of resistance, ritual, and mourning. Special waxes were mixed with herbs or oils to serve spiritual or medicinal purposes. Some households kept a guardian candle lit at all hours. Others used flame as a silent marker of who had lived and who hadn't. You choose another round, slightly green-tinged. It smells faintly of sage. "That one's for clarity," she says. If you're ready to remember clearly, you're not sure you are. Still, you buy both. She wraps them in linen, ties it with string, and adds a sprig of rosemary. "No charge," she says. You look like someone who carries ghosts. You carry the bundle home like it's a fragile truth. Later that night, when the wind picks up and the shutters tremble, you light the candle of memory. Its flame dances differently, slower, more deliberate. You stare into it until faces form in the wax. Some you know, some you don't. And for a moment, you feel steady. A scholar once wrote that during the Black Death, people used candles not only as tools, but as witnesses. Some households lit one per departed soul and lined them on windowsills like silent sentries. Others inscribed names into wax with pins, hoping the act alone might preserve memory beyond rot and time. You reach for your notebook. Draw the star and circle symbol. Write a few lines beneath it. Memory is wax. We shape it with fire. The flame gutters briefly, then flares. Outside bells ring again, not for death this time, but vespers. You blow out the candle, tuck the wax nub into your pouch, and breathe in the lavender still clinging to the air. And you wonder how many stories have been hidden in wax. A strange sidebar historians discovered in Florence, a set of candles sealed in ceramic jars, each labeled with a name and year, 1348, 1449, 1350. The candles were never burned. The theory, each one was meant for someone who never returned. The wax, still soft centuries later, holds the fingerprints of the person who sealed it. You wonder what you'd leave behind in wax. A name, a hope, a laugh. You wake to the scent of smoke, not the sharp, acrid warning kind. No, this is soft, almost sweet, like wood just starting to smolder mixed with something bready. You follow it to the town's outer lane where the old bakery stands, or rather, slouches. The roof leans like it's too tired to argue with gravity, and soot stains the stone walls in long black sighs. Inside, the baker is already at work. He doesn't look up. His arms are coated in gray dust, not flour. The mixing bowl in front of him is filled with ash, fine as powder, sifted like sugar. You hesitate. He notices. Ran out of flour, he says simply. You glance at the ash. He shrugs. People still need bread, or something like it, a common historical truth during plague years when grain shipments stalled and pantries ran dry. Bakers across Europe turned to strange substitutes: dried peas, acorns, moss, even ash, mixed with scraps of old dough or mashed root vegetables to stretch what little was left. It wasn't tasty, but it was warm, and sometimes that was enough. He pulls out a tray of what can only loosely be called loaves. They're flat, dense gray as stone, and shaped more by hope than by yeast. You take one. It's warm, heavy. You bite. It tastes like burnt air and salt. But beneath that, just barely, there's something comforting. A memory of food, a gesture toward nourishment. I call it survival bread, the baker says with a crooked smile. It's more honest than the name suggests. He pours a bit of water over the counter to settle the dust, then wipes it with an old cloth. People keep asking when the real flour is coming. I tell them this is real. It's just different now. You ask how long he's been doing this. He stops, kneading. Since my wife got sick, he says, she could only swallow soft things. I made her ash cakes because they helped her sleep. She said it reminded her of campfire bread from childhood. He glances toward the fire. She passed 2 winters ago. I still bake them. A silence settles between you, not awkward, just respectful. You buy a few cakes, hand him a silver button instead of coin. He nods without counting it. A fair trade, he says. Ash for silver, memory for meal. You leave with your bundle warm against your chest. Later, you unwrap one at home and split it with a neighbor too tired to cook. She smiles when she chews. Not bad, she says. Tastes like patience. A peculiar detail: some medieval ash breads were seasoned with crushed rose hips, elder bark, or even salt scraped from storage walls. A few bakers began shaping them into animal forms: doves, fish, stags, as symbols of luck or comfort. Archaeologists have found burnt remains of these loaves in hearths, their outlines still visible in hardened clay. You wonder if the baker's cakes carry shapes of their own ones, only revealed through hunger and memory. A small scholarly debate: were these substitute foods a mark of desperation or of culinary resilience? Some accounts frame them as tragic evidence of famine. Others see them as ingenious, even sacred proof that humans adapt flavor from ashes when flavor itself disappears. Perhaps both are true. You sit by your window as dusk falls. Tear another piece of ash cake. This one tastes faintly of fennel. You first see the map scrawled in chalk. It's behind the apothecary low on the brick wall, hidden beneath a sagging basket of dried thistle. A winding trail of symbols, arrows, crosses, tiny handprints, almost invisible until the light hits just right. You squat to examine it more closely. That's when she appears. The orphan. Nobody knows her name, just that she moves like wind through alleyways, and that she hasn't spoken since her brother died 2 winters ago. She watches you now, head tilted, one eye narrowed. You straighten dust on your knees and nod. She points at the map, then at you, then she vanishes. A soft detail from historical records in plague-ravaged cities. Children often created their own systems of navigation and safety. When adults were too sick, too scared, or too dead to help, kids marked walls with chalk symbols to track clean wells, quiet routes, or friendly doors. Some were just games, others were lifelines. You walk the path she marked. Each turn follows a clue, an X, for danger, a circle for kindness, a bird for food. The map loops behind bakeries, skirts a collapsed stable, and crosses 3 streams of running water. The chalk glows faintly under moonlight like a ghost's signature. At one bend, a broken doll leans against the wall, its eyes scratched out, its dress stitched with the shape of a key. Another signpost. You're not just following directions, you're stepping into someone's memory. A boy appears on a rooftop ahead, watching. Another girl waves from a shutter. You begin to realize the map isn't one person's, it's a network. Children have been building it together, trading marks, updating paths, covering dangers. In a world where adults enforce curfews and priests mutter about sins, this is something different, a live, kind secret. At one marked doorway, you knock gently. A hand reaches out and leaves a hard-boiled egg in your palm. No words, just warmth. A recorded aside, some city authorities dismissed these symbols as childish graffiti. Others quietly documented them. In one Genoese chronicle, a scribe writes of a secret chalk order that maintained peace in a northern quarter without any adult leadership. They called it the Circle of Lanterns. Your path leads to a courtyard lit by a single candle stub wedged into a cracked jar. Children sit in a half circle eating scraps of bread, passing a tin cup of water. They don't speak, but they nod when you approach. You sit. The girl who started this, who pointed at the map, hands you a scrap of parchment. On it is a new mark. 2 spirals side by side. She taps her own chest, then yours. A shared place, a shared safe space. You smile, and for the first time, she smiles back. An academic debate: did these informal, child-led systems actually reduce mortality? Or were they acts of psychological survival, ways for the young to assert control over a collapsing world? Historians argue both. But what's undeniable is that these maps outlasted the worst months, and some routes remain known to future generations. You retrace your steps home, marking one corner with your own symbol, a triangle for bread. You hope it helps. You light a small candle and sketch the map into your notebook, copying each curve and corner. You add her spiral, not as a souvenir, as a promise. The old mill still turns, barely. Its great wooden wheel creaks like tired bones, sluggish with moss and river drag. You can hear it long before you see it, an off-rhythm groan that sounds like a grocer sighing at empty shelves. The path to the mill is overgrown, and no one walks it but birds and you. At the door, you knock politely. The wood splinters a bit under your fingers. No answer. You push it open. Inside, the air is thick with dust. Not flour dust, stone dust. The miller glances up from his work, one eye twitching from years of strain. His hands are red and raw knuckles wrapped in linen. On the table beside him, a loaf, gray, dense, speckled with white flecks. You touch it. Grainy, stone bread, he says without greeting. You ask the obvious with real stone. He nods. You soak the pebbles in lye, grind them fine, mix with dried beetroot. No one's died from it yet. Comforting, a common historical fact in times of extreme famine, especially in plague years, millers sometimes ground bark clay or even soft rock like chalk or limestone into flour substitutes. While it dulled hunger, it also wore down teeth and stomachs alike. In Norway, Bark bread was made with pine inner bark. In Central Europe, chalk dust was added to make flour look more plentiful. It wasn't healthy, but it bought time. The miller slices the loaf with a worn knife. It sounds like cutting a brick. He hands you a piece. You chew. It tastes earnest, like the flavor equivalent of someone patting your back and saying, "There, there." You don't eat it for taste, he says. You eat it to remember how bad it got. He motions toward a shelf lined with tiny linen bags, memory samples, a pinch from every mix I've tried. Some with fish bone, some with nettle root. One had crushed snail shells. He points to one bag labeled simply, "Hope." That one didn't rise, he adds with a small grin. You learn that this mill was once the town's pride-stone ground, wheat oaths of purity fine white flour that fetched high prices at the docks. Now it grinds humility. You want to stay healthy? The miller mutters, you chew slow. Chew too fast, the stones chew back. You ask how long he's kept it running. He shrugs. The river runs, so I run. He shows you his stones round, pitted with age, but still moving. They groan as they spin grinding fragments of bark and beetroot into pale powder. A scholarly aside, some archaeobotanists have reconstructed famine-era loaves by analyzing residue in ancient grinding stones. Microscopic traces revealed odd additions: wild oats, dock seeds, tree bark, even dried algae. Some speculate these weren't mistakes, but desperate acts of innovation, a way to stretch life through scarcity. You sit on a cracked bench as the wheel turns. Outside, the river gurgles on. Inside, the stones grind. You feel the strange comfort of continuity, the idea that even in loss, someone kept moving, kept baking, kept chewing. The tavern door squeaks open like a secret, letting itself out. You step inside, expecting laughter, clanking mugs, maybe the off-key strum of a lute. But the room is nearly silent. Just the low murmur of voices and the gentle scrape of a chair leg over stone. The hearth burns low, casting long shadows against the walls where bundles of herbs hang upside down like sleeping bats. There's no smell of ale, no smell of stew. Only the sharp tang of rosemary and the faintest trace of vinegar. Cleaning vinegar, not cooking. You make your way to the corner where a group of villagers sits around a table passing a cracked clay cup, not filled with drink, but with small pebbles. One man picks a pebble, clears his throat, and begins a story. You take a seat at the edge. Welcome to the tavern with no ale, just stories. A common historical truth: during the worst years of plague, many taverns closed or were repurposed. The ones that stayed open often ran out of drink, but remained open as gathering places. People came not for beer, but for news, and when news ran dry, they told stories, old tales, borrowed tales, even lies dressed as truth. In a time when no one could afford a proper feast, words became the warmest thing on the menu. The woman next to you takes a pebble. I once saw a crow carry a candle in its beak, she says, right into a chimney, set the house alight. Just like that, the room hums with appreciation. Another picks a larger stone. My cousin boiled his boots, he says, then served them to guests as leather broth. Claimed it built character. You chuckle with the others. When your turn comes, you take a pebble, smooth and cool in your palm, and offer your story. You speak of the baker who makes ash cakes, of the chalk maps in the alleys, of a miller grinding memory into flour. No one interrupts. Here, truth and imagination dance like candlelight, flickering soft, impossible to pin down. A strange sidebar, some taverns in Plague-era Italy reportedly began talking bowl rituals. Patrons passed around empty mugs or bowls as storytelling tokens. Whoever held the bowl could speak without interruption. If the bowl was broken, the story ended early, a superstition meant to ward off lies or bad omens. The clay cup here has a crack down one side. You wonder how many stories ended halfway. In the corner, the old tavern keeper wipes the table with a damp rag humming. There's no bar to lean on, no tap to pull. Just rows of empty shelves and the flicker of firelight reflecting off the cracked glaze of old mugs. You notice a row of tally marks scratched into the table by your elbow, some crossed, through others circled. A personal calendar, a record of guests. No one explains. You don't ask. The stories continue. One woman speaks of a cat that warned her of sickness by hiding under the floorboards. A boy tells of a dream he had about a bridge made of bones that sang when walked upon. Another man recounts a real memory, helping a neighbor bury her husband with no priest, just whispered Latin and rosemary smoke. A scholarly debate where plague time stories, a form of resistance, a rebellion against silence. Some say storytelling was a survival instinct, turning fear into fiction to reclaim control. Others argue it was simple distraction, a lullaby for the adult mind. Either way, oral culture thrived in taverns like this passing memory, not through records, but through rhythm and rhyme. You ask the tavern keeper if there will be ale again. He smiles sadly. Maybe he says, but stories keep better. You hear the bell before you see the tower, a dull, solemn clang echoing across the fog-draped hills, steady as a heartbeat. It doesn't signal a service, nor a wedding, nor a feast. There's no funeral procession winding through the village, no priest in sight. Just the sound clear, low, and alone. You climb the path, damp leaves sticking to your boots. Moss creeps up the stones of the bell tower, its base half swallowed by time. Ivy weaves between the cracks like veins holding the ruin together with nature's patience. At the top, the bell ringer stands. She's not what you expected. Younger, thin, wrapped in a cloak too large for her, like she's borrowed grief from someone older. Her hands grip the rope loosely calloused from repetition. She doesn't look at you, only at the horizon. She pulls. The bell moans again, a common historical fact. During the height of the plague, many towns rang church bells not for ceremony, but for warning or remembrance. In some places, bells tolled hourly to remind the living to pray for the dying. In others, they rang for the dead no one could bury. In extreme cases, a bell might ring not for a person, but for a house, marking it as infected. You sit beside a wooden beam, the whole tower trembling with each swing of the bell. She finally speaks. I ring for those no one remembers. Her voice is soft, but steady. You'd be surprised how many that is. Below the village sleeps. No one comes to listen. But she rings anyway, twice at dawn, once at dusk, and always when the fog is thickest. You ask why. She shrugs. If the last sound you ever heard was silence, someone ought to fill it. A quiet aside, records from the 14th century mention phantom tolls bells said to ring by themselves with no rope pulled during plague peaks. Some said they were omens, others simply the wind. A few chroniclers claim bell towers were haunted by grief so strong it echoed in bronze. You notice a small ledger at her feet. Inside, names. Not real ones, just initials, memories, descriptions. Girl in yellow, near bakery. Old man with dog last seen by the well. Traveler with freckles helped carry wood. She logs them as she rings. A ceremony of acknowledgement, no incense, no choir, just echoes. You ask how long she's done this? Since I could reach the rope, she says. Before that, I just listened. She lets you ring once. The rope feels rough, worn smooth in some places by years of gripping hands. The bell responds with a deep sound that shivers through your bones. It's oddly comforting, as if your grief, borrowed or real, has a shape now. You watch her fold the ledger shut, tucking it beneath a loose stone in the wall. A scholarly debate. Some historians argue that bell ringing served practical purposes, warning towns of new deaths, setting rhythms for curfews. Others believe the ritual was largely spiritual, a way to cleanse the air, to mark time for souls drifting between worlds. In either case, the sound became a part of the plague's texture, a background hum of loss and rhythm. The wind rises. The bell swings harder, unprovoked. She steadies it with one hand. They say it's unlucky to let it ring alone. You nod, then gently offer to stay. Together, you ring once more, two people in an empty tower, giving shape to forgotten names. The tailor shop is tucked behind an alley of silence. Not literal silence, of course, but the kind of hush that wraps around forgotten corners of town where the stones remember more footsteps than the living ever could. The sign above the door has faded to near invisibility. If not for the flickering candle in the window, you'd think the shop was long abandoned. Inside, the air smells of waxed, thread-dried lavender and something sharper, maybe vinegar. Bolts of fabric rest in careful piles, their colors dimmed by time and dust. Patterns are sketched in charcoal on parchment, pinned with broken needles, and annotated in neat, looping handwriting. There's a mannequin in the corner, not headless but faceless, wrapped in gauze like a forgotten patient. And then you see them, dozens of masks, not the long-beaked kind worn by doctors, but cloth masks, soft and folded, some dyed with gentle colors, others left plain. Some are lined with herbs, others embroidered with charms or stitched prayers. The tailor steps out from the back. She's old, perhaps not in years, but in the folds of her eyes, in the way her fingers tremble just slightly with memory. Her apron is patched with threadbare hearts. She smiles at you without showing teeth. I so air, she says, like a greeting. You nod, not entirely sure what that means yet. A common historical fact. During plague outbreaks, protective masks were not reserved for physicians. While the iconic bird-like masks came much later, earlier forms of face coverings were more commonplace than we think. In many communities, women sewed cloth coverings soaked in vinegar camphor or herbal infusions, believing these would ward off bad air's miasma. Some even embroidered spells or saints' initials into the fabric, adding a layer of spiritual protection. The tailor invites you to sit. She offers you a scrap of linen damp with something aromatic. Mint and sage, she explains, calms the nerves and masks the smell of death. She doesn't flinch when she says it. You watch her thread a needle, her hands fluid with repetition. She sews not by pattern, but by memory. This one's for a baker, she murmurs. He wouldn't stop giving away bread. She folds the mask, pinches the pleats. This one's for a nurse. She used to braid her patients' hair before they passed. She doesn't ask who you are. She just begins making one for you. A strange sidebar. In some parts of 14th century Europe, masks were decorated not just for protection, but identification. Without modern forms of ID, a distinctive mask might become a person's only face in a crowd. One diary mentions a woman who embroidered a fox onto her mask so her children would recognize her when she returned from the quarantine ward. You ask if she's made masks for everyone. She sighs. No, just the one someone remembered. On the windowsill, dozens of finished masks lie folded like sleeping birds. She burns a sprig of rosemary and waves the smoke over them. A ritual, perhaps. A farewell. A blessing. You pick up a pale blue one stitched with stars. What's this one? She squints. Ah, that's for the boy who liked to watch the night sky. Thought maybe the stars would follow him. A scholarly debate was the use of aromatic masks effective against the plague. From a modern standpoint, no. The Yersinia pestis bacterium travels through fleas and rodents, not air. But from a cultural view, these masks offered a layer of agency, comfort, and dignity. Scholars now study plague-era textile remnants to better understand how people fought fear with fabric. She hands you your mask. The stitching is uneven in places, but the shape fits perfectly. You try it on. It smells faintly of cloves and something warmer like wool left in sunlight. The sun hasn't risen yet, but you're already following the trail. Tiny prints in the mud, a streak of tail, a squeak too sharp to be friendly. You're shadowing the rat catchers. They don't wear uniforms, no badges, no town seals, just patched trousers, heavy boots, and belts weighed down with pouches of herbs, traps, and strangely tiny whistles. You spot the leader by his hat, a crushed tricorn with a red feather that's probably outlived several owners. He turns slightly when you step closer. Keep your distance, he mutters. They know new smells. He doesn't mean his crew. He means the rats. A common historical fact. Rats were not only seen as vermin during the plague, they were harbingers, omens, and sometimes scapegoats. While modern science tells us that fleas carried by black rats were the real culprits, medieval towns often blamed the rats directly. Entire professions were built around catching drowning or smoking them out. In some cities, rat catchers were registered and even taxed based on the number of tails they brought in. You follow the crew through alleyways, through drains, through streets still slick with last night's rain. They don't speak unless necessary. Communication comes in the form of gestures. 3 fingers raised means a trap is ready. A soft click of the tongue signals movement nearby. One man, young, missing an eyebrow, leans down and pulls a sack taut, inside motion, clawing, squealing. You look away. Better in the sack than in your soup, he says casually. They aren't cruel, just efficient. You ask if they kill all the rats. No, says the leader. Some we study. He pulls out a scroll, not town records, but a map. Scribbled lines, rat paths, nest clusters, places where sightings surge. You learn their routes, he explains. Then you know where the next sickness might show. A fascinating sidebar. Some medieval rat catchers kept journals of infestations. These strange field notes, part natural history, part folklore, tracked rat behaviors, rat weather, and even claimed to predict outbreaks based on rat aggression. Some towns paid bonuses for early warnings. You enter what looks like an ordinary cellar. It isn't. The door bolts from the inside. The air smells of oil and mint. Inside, jars of specimens, bones, vials of fleas trapped in wax. On one wall, a diagram of a rat dissected in detailed ink. It's a study hall. The rat catchers call it the burrow. Here, they compare findings, log bites, and test different oils to repel vermin. One woman, sharp-eyed, steady-handed, is boiling something thick and bitter in a copper pot. When asked, she simply says, "Repellent test 5. You ask if it works. She dips a stick in and sets it near a cage. The rats recoil. Well enough, she nods. A scholarly debate. While rat extermination was widespread, some scholars argue it was counterproductive. Killing dominant rats often caused territorial chaos, leading to faster spread among smaller colonies. Others believe early rat studies helped pave the way for understanding disease vectors even before the science existed to explain them. One of the younger apprentices offers you a charm. It's a rat skull, worn smooth, strung on a leather cord. For luck, he says, or for looking scarier than the next guy. The knock is soft. 2 raps, then a pause, then one more. You've learned that this rhythm means something. Not a visitor, not a soldier, a midwife. The door creaks open and you're ushered into a one-room home that smells of boiling water, beeswax candles, and the iron tang of anticipation. Inside, a woman labors. Her hands clench linen, her breath stutters, and her eyes flick to the corners of the room like she's chasing away shadows. But the midwife is calm, steady. Her presence alone is like a hush blanketing everything. She nods to you without speaking, already wrist deep in the ritual of life. You stay back near the hearth and you wait. A common historical fact. During the Black Death, midwives continued their work under immense pressure. Despite the risk of infection, many stayed in plague-stricken towns, delivering babies with bare hands and makeshift tools. Some cities even issued them special permits, allowing them to cross quarantine lines to aid childbirth. They were healers, guides, and on occasion witnesses to life and death arriving together. You watch as the midwife massages the woman's belly with oil infused with marjoram and mugwort. She whispers to the mother words not meant for you, but you catch fragments breathe like the sea. Think of warm bread. You are not alone. The cries grow sharper, but the midwife never wavers. She works like someone who's seen worse. You wonder how many births she's witnessed during plague seasons. How many first breaths were taken in homes already haunted by death. She lifts a small wooden charm from her pouch and places it beside the woman's head, a carved acorn worn smooth by many hands. For luck, she murmurs. For roots, a strange sidebar. Some midwives in plague times carried birthing talismans, small carved figures or coins sometimes dipped in wine or vinegar, believed to ward off illness or bad spirits. In parts of Italy, midwives tied red ribbons around their arms during deliveries, a color thought to protect against disease. The baby arrives just after sunrise, small, quiet, pink as peach skin in spring. The midwife clears its lungs with a linen strip, rubs its back until it squeaks, and then places the child on the mother's chest. No applause, no celebration, just breath. That's enough. A scholarly debate. How did midwives protect themselves during plague outbreaks? Some argue they had access to the best folk remedies, herbal poultices, protective charms, ritual hygiene. Others suggest it was luck or the sheer strength of immunity built from constant exposure. Still, many midwives died from the work they refused to abandon. You help by cleaning the basin, by holding the still warm cloths. The midwife thanks you with a glance. That's all. She wraps the baby in boiled wool, then carefully dips her fingers into a pouch of dried rose petals and sprinkles them around the hearth. A tradition, she says, to remind the air what sweetness is. You ask if she's ever refused to call. She shakes her head. If they call, I go. Even when the mother's house was marked. Even when the birth was the last thing left to do. Even when no one else would come. The abbey stands at the edge of the valley like a half-remembered song. Its bell tower cracked its windows, blind with dust. No hymns echo from its halls now. Just the steady whistle of wind through broken stone. You push open the gate, it groans. Inside silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence of stillness. The kind that hushes your thoughts, makes you feel like you're not the only one listening. You've come for the choir, or what remains of it, a common historical fact. During plague years, many monasteries and convents suffered staggering losses. Entire choirs disappeared, yet some continued to sing even as their numbers dwindled. Their chants, often performed in near-empty halls, were said to be both prayer and defiance. In certain records, monasteries, with only a handful of surviving monks, still held daily services, their voices barely more than whispers. You walk past collapsed pews and faded tapestries. In the choir loft, you see them, 4 figures in robes too large for their frames. They do not speak. Instead, one nods. Another adjusts the pages of a hymn book, its notes hand-drawn in dark ink smudged at the corners. Their mouths move not loud enough to echo, but just enough to shape the sound. You can't hear them at first. Then you do, faint, a low drone, barely a thread of melody, like breath held between prayers, a strange sidebar. In the later stages of the plague, silent choirs emerged, groups of survivors who sang with minimal sound, believing soft chanting might calm the dying or help their voices travel more gently to heaven. Some wore cloth over their mouths to avoid spreading infection, transforming their songs into hushed vibrations rather than traditional hymns. The lead cantor is the oldest. His eyes are milk-glazed and his voice rasps like dry leaves. But he holds pitch. He knows the parts by heart. One monk strikes a bell softly just once, marking a change in verse. The note lingers. It is not perfect music, but it is deeply alive. You sit on a bench near the altar. The stone is cold, but your chest feels warm. You watch them sing through vespers. No audience, no fanfare, just breath and rhythm and an unspoken promise that silence too can praise. A scholarly debate. Were these final choirs acts of spiritual resistance or ritual habit? Some believe they sang for the dying, hoping chant could ease the soul's journey. Others suggest they sang to stave off their own despair. Either way, these records reveal a rare glimpse of sacred endurance when voices persisted even as the world stilled. After the service, the cantor approaches you. He does not ask why you came. He simply places a vellum scroll in your hand, lyrics from the hymn they just sang. Inked in trembling lines, one word is underlined in red lux light. "You'll need it," he says, smiling faintly, "for wherever you go next, you wake to the sound of bells, not tolling for death, but ringing for morning." High above the town, the cathedral's bell tower cuts a pale shape against the sky, Mist drifts past its edges like breath slow and reluctant to leave. You climb the winding steps worn smooth from centuries of footsteps, some hopeful, some heavy. Your fingers graze the stone as you ascend, cold, damp, but solid. At the top, the bell ringer waits. He's older than the stairs, or at least he moves like it. Wrapped in a heavy wool coat, fingers calloused and curled like roots, he nods without speaking. His eyes are clear and his grip steady as he pulls the rope once then again. The bell groans into motion, a slow swing, a rising hum, then the sound. It's not mournful anymore, not quite celebratory either, just steady, like a heartbeat rediscovered. A common historical fact, bells played a vital role during plague times, not just to mark deaths, but to signal curfews, summon priests, or announce the safe reopening of markets. In the final stages of plague waves, many towns held ritual cleansing chimes, ringing bells at dawn for weeks to symbolically drive the sickness out. In places like Milan and Avignon, these bells were rung at very specific intervals, echoing long into fields where no one stood. You look down at the town. Shutters creak open. A vendor sets out baskets. A child skips between puddles. A woman lights a stove and leans into its warmth. No one celebrates, not yet, but there is movement. And that's enough. The bell ringer clears his throat. 87 days since the last funeral, he mutters, "Not that I count." You smile. But you both know he counts. Every town had one like him, keeper of rhythm, witness of time. Not a priest, not a healer, not a magistrate, just someone who endured. A curious sidebar. Some towns believed that bells could purify the air, that the vibrations disrupted miasmas. This belief led to elaborate ringing patterns with different notes assigned to different districts. In a few cases, bell towers were even sealed during outbreaks, only reopened after sound exorcisms were completed by clerics. You ask if he ever stopped ringing. He shrugs. The bell stopped. "I didn't." A quiet answer, and a true one. A scholarly debate. Were these final rings meant for the living or the dead? Some say they honored survivors. Others that they soothed restless spirits still clinging to alleys and attics. Either way, towns recorded noticeable psychological shifts after public ringing, resumed marketplaces, reopened families emerged, and the language of silence was slowly replaced by one of sound. He hands you a brass token, not money, not a charm, just a small disc engraved with a circle and a tiny bell. They gave them to us, he says, those who rang through. You pocketed. And for a moment, you wonder, how would you have marked survival? A scar, a song, a brass token that says, "I was there and I kept moving." You made it through winding streets and whispered prayers, through candlelit altars and quiet kitchen corners, through masks steeped in vinegar and bells that rang not just for endings, but for survival. You walked gently alongside history's quietest voices. Now, night deepens, and in its hush, you carry all that you've seen, the soft cloth tied across a child's face, the trembling hands of a grave digger brushing dust from bone, the midwife's warm silence, the choir's last trembling note. These were not the loud stories of kings or wars. No banners waved, no horns called. But in their stillness, these stories lived in the scent of rosemary placed beside a shroud, in the soft rustle of linen near the fire, in the hands that stitched even as the world unraveled. And as you rest now, your head low, your breath steady, know that you've seen something rare, how ordinary souls frightened but not frozen chose care over chaos, chose song over silence, chose to go on. You don't need to remember every name or every date. It's enough to remember the warmth, the motion, the small defiant gestures that made the difference between despair and devotion. Even the oldest tales still have something new to say if we listen gently. May this moment of quiet carry you through the night like a soft breeze through open windows. That's it for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.
In the silent winter night, as the last flicker of candlelight in the thatched cottage dimmed and a sliver of moonlight slipped through the uneven roof, the damp straw below glimmered faintly in silver. From outside came the soft clucks of hens settling into their nests and the whisper of the wind stirring the wooden beams. Amidst that worn, golden straw lay an infant swaddled in a warm strip of yellow cloth, lips pressed together in slumber within the humble stable. Beside the manger knelt a man in a green tunic, eyes alight with equal measures of worry and wonder. Two women knelt nearby, their forms shadowed against the darkness, one clutching a white hen to her chest, the other pressing her hand gently to her pregnant belly. Above them, a circular carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood crowned the rafters, lending an almost sacred hush to the moment. It was as if heaven and earth held their breath, waiting to witness a miraculous destiny just beginning to unfold. Chapter 1. A dawn in the straw-filled stable. In the faint glow of the lone oil lamp hanging from a rafter, the small thatched cottage beside the village lay in a profound stillness, as though nothing extraordinary were about to take place. A chilly winter wind crept into the gaps in the roof, carrying with it the mingled scent of fresh hay and damp, moldy undertones from recent days of drizzle. On the cold, damp ground inside the stable, patches of dry straw clung to the feathers of the chickens, evidence of the relentless, persistent rain. Outside on the low-hanging eaves, hens, roosters, and chicks waited patiently for the downpour to finally cease, pecking at bits of grain amid the straw. A sliver of waning moonlight shone down as a silvery carpet, making the scattered straw shimmer like a field of golden embers. Amid the damp straw, resting in an old wooden manger, lay an infant swaddled snugly in a warm, pale golden cloth. Only the infant's serene, sleeping face was visible, a tiny bud of life glowing softly against the rugged backdrop of the stable. From outside came the distant echo of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of straw shifting as the chickens scratched about. A man with deep olive green eyes and a tall, lean frame knelt beside the manger, clad in a long tunic of forest green and a muted gray-green cloak. He pressed his hands together in prayer, his gaze tenderly fixed on the child. Under the dim lamplight, his face bore the lines of worry shaded by a profound, unspoken joy. To his left, near the stable's edge, knelt two women determined to find peace in this lonely night. One wore a warm reddish-orange dress with a pale yellow headscarf wrapped tightly around her head. Her hands rested gently on her abdomen as though she felt the child's heartbeat mirrored in her own. The second woman, clad in a deep indigo gown with a simple white linen veil over her head, cradled a white hen in her arms, as though even the family's fowl deserved protection in the chill air. Her thin arms clutched the hen's soft feathers, evoking an image both delicate and resolute. High atop the stable's gabled roof, a small circular carving depicted a mother hen sheltering her brood, a quiet symbol of guardianship and protection that seemed to bless the humble scene below. Amid the silence of the night, broken only by the wind's soft moan and the patter of straw, the tableau felt both utterly ordinary, like a rural farm scene, and mysteriously sacred, as if lifted from the pages of a medieval illuminated manuscript. The world beyond the stable's walls seemed to vanish, leaving only the hush of the family's vigil. No one could yet know what fate awaited the child drifting peacefully in that manger. In this moment, however, wrapped in the straw and candlelight, the newborn represented new hope. To the man kneeling, his weathered features alight with fatherly devotion, the child was a promise. He vowed that this tiny life would be protected with every ounce of his devotion. The two women, though bearing the weariness of the world on their shoulders, knelt in quiet prayer, trusting that this child would somehow thrive despite the hardships. Chapter 2. The Journey Home. The next morning, the first light of spring trickled through the cracked plaster of the small cottage, casting golden beams across the damp flagstones of the narrow path leading to an arched courtyard gate. The cock's crowing was joined now by the laughter and chatter of children playing in the village below. Inside the humble stable, the green-clad man from the night before stood expectantly at the wooden doorway, his eyes flicking with concern as a small procession of strangers approached. At their forefront walked a young nobleman wearing a burnt orange cloak edged with forest green trim. Beneath it, he sported a green tunic finely embroidered at the cuffs, and he cradled a heavy leather-bound book beneath one arm. Beside him, a handmaiden in a flowing jade gown carried a bundle of straw in her arms, bowing respectfully to the man in the doorway. The young noble spoke in a calm, measured tone, his dark beard neatly trimmed. "We have received word that a young woman has given birth in dire poverty in a nearby hamlet. We wish, if it pleases you, to be taken to this place so we may bear witness ourselves." The green-clad man's expression changed instantly, shifting from concern to guarded curiosity. The memory of the straw-lined manger from hours before flickered in the noble's eyes. With a steady nod, the man gestured for them to enter the small house, where a thin woman lay resting on a rough wooden bed against the far wall. Pale morning light filtered in through the arched doorway behind her, revealing the exhaustion etched into her face. She stirred as the noble and his entourage stepped in. It was the mother of the newborn from the stable. Through a croak in her throat, she addressed the noble as he approached. "My lord, if you have come for that child." "I hardly know how to explain. I gave birth in this straw-filled stable alone. My parents have long since passed, and the child's father abandoned me once he learned I was expecting. I have managed alone, without a coin to my name, just as you see." The green-clad man moved to her side, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My lord," he implored the noble, "pray do not dismiss us entirely. We are but poor folk who have endured hardship and illness. If you find no value in the child, we will gratefully accept your mercy to care for its mother and kin." The young noble gave a half-smile, placing a hand on the mother's quilt. Then, his gaze drifted to the small bundle of golden straw in the corner, recalling the child's warm breath in the darkness. He exhaled slowly and said, "I do not relish empty superstitions, but if this child was born in such a most unusual place, then perhaps there is something extraordinary within him. We will take him to the northern keep. There the wise and learned may confirm whether he bears any divine mark. Until then, attend to his mother and him, and keep them safe." The green-clad man bowed his head and pressed the noble's hand gratefully. "We thank your grace. If the child bears no gift, show us mercy. If so, we trust in your compassion." With that, the noble turned to his handmaiden. "You two go ahead and guide them. I will follow close behind. Bring medicinal herbs, dried bread, and a few hens so the mother and child have sustenance on the road." They departed along the winding country lane, the man with the infant cradled in his arms, the cold breeze stirring the mother's hair and the edges of the weathered cloth that wrapped the baby. The child slept soundly, oblivious to the forested hills and misty swamps they passed, unaware that he slumbered so near the edge of destiny. Before the noble could leave the small dwelling, the green-clad man knelt once more at the threshold of the stable and bowed his head. "Thank you, your grace. May heaven bear witness to our gratitude." A final sob from the mother, echoing against the tattered wooden walls, followed the traveling party as they melted into the countryside. Chapter 3: Discovery at the Mistbound Keep. The journey spanned many leagues across fields dotted with ancient oak trees, their skeletal branches clattering in the harsh spring wind. Rays of grayish sunlight fractured through shifting banks of mist, momentarily draping the land in silver. Atop a gentle rise stood the craggy keep, its stone walls coated in greenish moss, with a turret poking skyward like the tip of a spear aimed at the clouds. Its great oak doors, heavy and cracked, sat closed as if challenging anyone to enter. When the procession arrived, the imposing gates creaked open under the touch of guards clad in polished chainmail. Their helmets caught the pale dawn light as they formed a silent aisle leading the travelers into a vast paved courtyard. A small fountain gurgled faintly at its center, the water falling in delicate arcs as though testing the chill air. Stained glass windows, depicting saints and biblical scenes, cast kaleidoscopic reflections across the flagstones. Inside the great hall, the noble, now flanked by advisors and officials, stood before a marble dais, the carved dragons and phoenixes on its edges gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Portraits on the walls recounted epic voyages and holy miracles. One image unmistakably showed a child laid in a manger scene, mirroring the very scene that brought them here. The noble spoke with steely composure. "We have brought this child, whom rumor claims was born amidst animals in a humble stable, to this place. Let learned men and women examine him. Should he possess any divine mark, make it known. If not, we shall return him to his mother and end this matter." An elder statesman presided from a seat of honor. His gray hair framed a face carved by years of governance and prayer. "Very well," he replied in a gravelly voice. "Summon our wisest physicians, astrologers, and spiritual guides." In bygone ages, texts spoke of children born under a waning moon in such humble settings as forebears of great change. We shall confirm whether this child is touched by providence or simply a peasant's offspring. After a respectful nod from the noble, attendants escorted the mother and child into a small side chamber. The mother perched herself on a narrow bed, hugging her bundle closely, while the attending surgeon, an aging man with sunken eyes and ink-stained fingertips, prepared his instruments of glass and metal. He inspected the baby's face, feeling for pulses, mapping each freckle and vein. "Born on such a night, with the moon low and the stars arranged thus," he mumbled, tracing a quill across parchment. "The child carries the sign of the celestial radiance. Yet his flesh bears no blemish nor weakness, save an uncommon warmth beneath his skin." The mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Surely you do not subscribe to mere superstition." "He is my son, and I will protect him." The physician, eyes glinting in intrigue, waved his hand. "I rely not on superstition but on prognosis and study. Yet this child's reaction to my salves is unexpected." He uncovered a small bowl of herbal decoction and dabbed a smudge to the child's brow. The mother stifled a gasp as a faint blush rose and then dissipated from the baby's skin within heartbeats. "Remarkable," he said softly. "His resistance is beyond mortal. He may live through the harshest winter. Plague might pass him by as if he were touched by something extraordinary." Meanwhile, a group of venerable monks had gathered in a circle outside the chamber, chanting prayers in hushed tones. Their voices echoed through the marble corridors, each syllable a plea for the child's well-being. The fragrance of incense swirled in the air as they burned frankincense, and the smoke wreathed around the pillars, imparting a sense of solemnity as though heaven were itself leaning in to listen. Chapter 4. Sacred Care and Divine Imagery. The next morning, the child was placed in a chamber adorned with draperies of deep teal and crimson, the walls painted in motifs of cherubic angels and swirling vines. A soft rug of scarlet lay underfoot, offering warmth against the stone. The mother, her robes now exchanged for finer linens, sat close at her son's side, while the nobleman hovered near the door, anxiety etched on his face. The child, now cradled on a bed of golden straw within a small alcove painted in shades of greenish blue, stirred as though sensing the swirl of incense and candlelight. A holy sister, her head unshrouded and framed by a faint golden halo, knelt beside him, cradling him gently. Her gown of deep crimson spilled around her knees, white undersleeves hugging her wrists. As she fed the child from a simple clay bowl, the faint glow of the halo glinted off her serene features, and villagers murmured prayers of gratitude. Outside the alcove, a woman in a cerulean gown edged with white stood holding a basket brimming with bread and fruits. She smiled at the child's mother, then edged forward, offering sustenance. Meanwhile, a cluster of white and gray hens scratched in the straw-laden floor, pecking at stray grains as though drawn by the hush of holiness. Behind them, the walls glowed a muted gold, adorned with circular medallions showing saintly faces, each encircled by delicate filigree and ochre tones. Soft candlelight danced upon the mosaic floor, making the mosaics seem to shimmer like dust-kissed fireflies in the dusk. Outside the alcove's door, villagers knelt in silence, farmers and simple craftsmen, their weathered hands folded in reverence. They came bearing humble offerings, bowls of porridge, jars of honey, hand-woven cloth to shield the child from winter's chill. In this moment, even a modest henhouse within the keep became a sacred space where life and devotion converged in gentle harmony. Chapter 5. Teaching and a Brewing Crisis. Following the child's initial examinations, he was moved to a small, quiet chamber hung with tapestries illustrating scenes of compassion and mercy. The mother slept on a modest bed of carved wood and soft linens, comforted at last by better garments and a sense of security. The child, who was now old enough to perceive, began each day with lessons in basic scripture and morality, his little hands tracing the curves of ancient runes upon parchment as novice monks guided him in simple prayers. Outside, however, a creeping unease spread through the keep and its surrounding villages. A sudden outbreak of plague swept through the outer hamlets, claiming the elderly and the infirm. As rumors of pestilence and catastrophe reached the keep, an ominous whisper took shape that the child, born under miraculous signs, was himself a harbinger of doom, or worse, a demonic pawn. A faction of courtiers, far more interested in their own narrow ambitions than any child's safety, began spreading malicious rumors. One evening, as the candles flickered low in the dim corridors, the young noble was confronted by a veiled messenger bearing an ominous warning. If that child lives, your influence wanes, your grace. If he truly possesses celestial power, you will be cast aside and your name reviled. The noble's jaw clenched in frustration. He retorted, voice quivering with resolve. I do not wish to harm a child, but if I must protect him at all costs, I will. Such slander has no basis. Meanwhile, the chapel's aged abbot and his acolytes worked tirelessly to keep hope alive. Their gentle chants echoed through stone naves, candles reflecting off stained glass depictions of angels guiding lost souls. The abbot implored the noble. We must guard the boy. These slanders spring from fear and ignorance. Let me lead a procession of prayer and light to shield him. But the noble, haunted by threats of betrayal and power struggles, responded with weary frustration. Every day brings new peril. If I do nothing, conspiracies grow bolder. Save the boy first, then quell the treachery. Thus did the keep's hushed tranquility fracture, replaced by overlapping currents of devotion and dread. Chapter 6. A night of desperate struggle. In the farthest chamber of the keep, a dim, narrow room where a single candle sputtered, sat the mother, her son nestled in her arms, both swathed in fine wool to ward off the night's chill. The plague's ghostly shadow hovered beyond the stone walls, and the mother, haggard and pale, often awoke in a panic, sure she'd lost him in her dreams. The baby rested peacefully, oblivious to the plotting that pulsed beyond the heavy oak door. In the dead of night, a figure draped in dark robes slipped into that very chamber. The candle's fluttering light revealed a hired assassin, a gaunt man with cruel eyes, slipping a small vial of poison into a clay cup. The mother stirred, sensing an intruder. Her heart hammered as she realized the man intended to harm her child. In one swift motion, she lunged from the bed, grabbing his arm. She strained to hold him, her nails digging into his wrist as he tried to pull free. A whisper of steel sliced through the darkness. Another conspirator, waiting just outside, thrust a dagger through the crack in the door. The assassin let out a strangled cry as the blade found its mark. Blood spurted into the candlelight, staining the wooden floor. The mother, panic-stricken, clutched her son and screamed, her voice echoing through the silent halls. Outside, the alarm bells clanged with urgent clangs. Guards in chainmail, swords drawn, flooded the corridors. The plague's fear turned to fear of treachery as the clash of steel rang through the keep. Within moments, the three conspirators, 2 assassins, and the mysterious instigator were seized and bound. Though they had hoped to extinguish a life they deemed troublesome, they were instead caught in the violent throng of justice. The noble, awakened by the uproar, raced through the torchlit corridors. His boots thundered on flagstones still damp from the night's chill. Bursting into the chamber, he beheld the child's mother cradling her son, tears and sweat streaking her ashen cheeks. He dropped to his knees and gathered the infant into his arms, his face wrought with guilt. I failed you both. I will not let this harm come again. Outside, the clash of guards drove the frightened conspirators into submission. But the noble's heart was already racing with new urgency. He realized the life of this child, so vulnerable, had become the fulcrum of his own destiny. Chapter 7. A Miracle of Light. Beyond the clamor of captivity, in the highest tower's inner sanctuary, the abbot and his monks gathered in prayer. Candles flickered in a cold, vaulted chamber as the abbot intoned incantations for protection and healing. Their voices formed a low, steady hum that resonated through the stone walls as though evoking solace from the ether itself. Outside, the keep's gates remained shut tight, unyielding to the plague that battered the land. Within the mother's chamber, as the fight waned, shouts faded to muffles, the candle's flame flared violently. The wax erupted in swirls of emerald and crimson fire, casting wild shadows across the walls. The newborn, tucked in his mother's loving arms, stirred, his little body glowing with a soft, aquamarine light. The mother's eyes widened in awe as she pressed her hand protectively over him, feeling warmth suffuse through her trembling fingers. At the window's sill, the gilded painting of a saintly visage. The very scene of the child's miraculous birth seemed to glow in step with the baby's luminous aura. The mother, overcome with wonder, murmured, "My child, what power dwells within you?" Below, the nobleman had sprinted to a high window. From this vantage, he watched the candles flare and witnessed the child bathed in that azure glow. A gasp escaped his lips. It is true, a miracle. In his mind's eye, possibilities unfurled like banners in the wind. If he truly carries this divine spark, I must guard him at all costs. Let no conspiracy snuff out this light. Back in the great hall, as rumors of the child's wondrous radiance spread, swords fell silent, cries of aggression died on the lips of soldiers. Every man at arms lowered his weapon, eyes lifted to the turret battlements, and a hush descended. Even the gloom-laden corridors felt an unexpected warmth, as if a transcendent presence stood in solidarity with the child and his mother. Chapter 8. Renewal and Reconciliation. After the glow receded, leaving only a gentle warmth in its wake, the infant returned to his mother's arms as though he had merely shifted in slumber. The mother wept softly, pressing his small face to her chest, grateful tears streaming into his hair. The noble, having rushed into the chamber, knelt before her, tears glistening in his eyes. He lifted the child and bowed low. "Forgive me, mother. I failed in protecting him. But now I see, this child's destiny may be greater than any of us can fathom." The mother clasped her son tightly, a faint tear marking his cheek as she looked at the noble with solemn gratitude. He was a gift from heaven. I only sought to protect him. Below, in the great hall, the elder statesman and all the assembled courtiers and advisors knelt, their eyes shining with reverence. The elder's voice then boomed. "This is proof of divine presence. Any who doubt shall face consequences for accusing the innocent." The noble placed the infant gently on a cushioned dais. Reverently he turned to the gathering. "From this moment on, no harm shall come to him. Let him be taught of mercy and compassion." A chorus of applause rose, and the keep's residents from steward to serf cried out in celebration. Swayed by the miracle, the faction conspiring to destroy the child stepped forward, kneeling before the noble. With tears streamed down their faces, they confessed their calumnies and pledged loyalty anew. An elder monk then addressed the crowd. "Let us consecrate this child in prayer, so that he may grow in wisdom and empathy. If any still harbor malice, may divine justice turn them to righteousness." Roughly a year passed. Spring returned again, and the keep, once plagued and broken, now thrived with blooming orchards and golden fields. The child, now called Andreas, walked the halls, clad in a silk tunic of sky blue and gold embroidery. Crowned with the humble straw from his birthplace as a token, he offered blessings to all who came before him. Beneath the dais, bowls of chicken broth, herbal remedies, and freshly baked bread stood ready, laid out by grateful villagers. The boy's mother, now clad in a gleaming white robe, watched from a side dais, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "My child has fulfilled his purpose. He has shown us the meaning of faith." The noble, elevated now to the title Duke of Light's Vigil, stood behind the dais and addressed the statesman. "Your guidance and the monk's prayers saved him. He is our blessing." The statesman bowed deeply, his voice thick. "Andreas is heaven's messenger. In his presence, cruelty and fear dissolve." As music played throughout the keep, harps, lutes, flutes weaving melodies of hope, Andreas took a small harp. With a trembling child's voice, he sang 2 lines of verse. "In humble straw, life's ember glows. A light of love through winter's throes." Silence fell as every soul listened, then applause swelled as a tide. Children clapped in delight, elders wept in gratitude. The church bells rang out, and for a moment, all fear and discord seemed banished by that simple, shining truth. Chapter 9. A Peaceful Countryside Reimagined. A year later, fields of barley swayed beneath azure skies, the keep's sturdy walls eclipsed by blossoming cherry trees. Duke Andreas, now 5 years old, traveled with his parents through sunlit villages, distributing bread and healing herbs to the poor. He spoke with kindly eyes to every child, offering encouragement even to the most ailing. "Fear not, dear friend. Spring always returns." Villagers would weep with joy, kissing his hands, while farmers set fresh eggs and poultry by the roadside in thanks. Among them, hens pecked at stray grain, unconcerned by the noble procession. In the distance, a modest wooden shelter built atop a gentle knoll stood as a tribute to the innocent beginnings, a straw-lined manger next to a small coop. The Duke explained to his son, "Here is where you came from, a simple stable amidst the veldt. Remember that humility is the foundation of your heart." The boy nodded solemnly, stroking a young chick that nestled against his boot. He turned to his father. "I will not forget. Every life is precious." That evening, as the crimson sun sank behind the hills, the boy sat upon a straw bale, gazing at the vibrant glow. He closed his eyes and silently prayed. "Grant all your creatures peace. Let fear be banished and love endure." A soft breeze rustled the straw as if echoing his plea. At that moment, a flock of hens beneath the coop scattered in a flurry of feathers, then settled quietly once more, uneasy, perhaps, in the presence of such grace. The Duke glanced at his son, pride and wonder mixing in his eyes. "Your words are the balm the world needs." From that day forward, travelers spoke of the joyful Duke and the blessed child of the stable, and the once humble mound of straw blossomed into a place of pilgrimage. Pilgrims left baskets of poultry feed and straw at the manger, believing that in honoring Andrias's birthplace, they shared in his divine favor. Chapter 10, Legacy of the Manger. Seasons passed, and the Duke's realm thrived in prosperity. Under the steady guidance of Duke Andrias, famine and disease receded. Villagers cultivated their fields with renewed vigor. Children grew up learning from the Duke's teachings of compassion and humility. Each spring, a festival filled the hills with laughter. Costumed dancers imitated the pecking hens, musicians played lilting jigs, and families shared hearty stews of chicken and barley. At the heart of it all lay a small straw-lined manger, retained within a simple wooden shelter, its planks engraved with phrases of peace. Andrias, now a bright and eloquent 10-year-old, would stand in the center of the festival grounds, sharing his story in gentle verses. From humble straw, the light was born, a gift of grace on winter's morn. Villagers, from blacksmiths and bakers to weavers and shepherds, listened intently. They offered eggs, fresh herbs, and woven ribbons as tributes, symbols that all shared in the child's miracle. The Duke looked on, his silvering hair caught in the breeze, and knelt beside his son, pressing a father's kiss to Andrias's brow. He thought back to the night in that dark stable, how a newborn's prayer for mercy had reshaped an entire realm. The once hopeless cottage of straw had become the cornerstone of a legacy that transcended time. When times grew hard once more, storms flooding the fields, sickness descending on the elderly, the people rekindled their faith in the child's promise. They prayed at the straw-lined shelter, not because they expected magic to erase all suffering, but because they knew in their hearts that hope and unity could overcome any darkness. And so, the humble stable's memory endured, in every humble straw, in every clucking hen, in every child's bright eyes. People felt whisperings of Andrias's miracle, reminders that love and light can bloom in even the humblest of beginnings. Across generations, mothers told their children of the child of the manger, fathers shared the story by hearth fires. Each pilgrimage to the straw mound ended with a banquet of roasted poultry and barley bread, an act of thanksgiving for life's simple blessings. People of all stations, nobles and peasants alike, set aside their grievances to share in a common bond. The knowledge that from dire poverty and vulnerability could yet spring a force of compassion strong enough to change the world. In the end, the tiny infant who first opened his eyes under a tattered roof had sown the seeds of a new era, one where humility triumphed over pride, kindness triumphed over fear, and love triumphed over hatred. The flickering candle of that winter night remained alive in each heart, a steadfast flame guiding humankind through every storm. And thus, the legacy of the manger, born in an unassuming straw-filled stable, remained a testament to the enduring power of mercy and the miracle that, no matter how bleak, hope can shine forth in the darkest hour. Epilogue. Notes on the tale of the manger. This tale spans over 4,000 words in American English, tracing the narrative from the humble stable birth through the trials at the mistbound keep to the final flourishing inheritance of compassion. The storyline is drawn entirely from a detailed visual analysis of 5 critical images, each focusing on the stable setting, the color palette, the figure's attire, and the symbolism of divine light. It is intended that the legacy of the manger serve as a parable of faith, resilience, and the redemptive power of compassion, reminding readers that profound miracles often begin in the most unassuming places. End. Chapter 1. A warm straw stall in the midst of winter. At the threshold between night and dawn, when the sky was still pale from the lingering clouds hovering overhead, A chill wind from the north whispered through the gaps in the red-tiled roof of the cottage perched on the hillside. Inside that century-old, thatch-roofed home, where the faint strains of folk music still lingered from the main room, a lone candle flickered, casting a dancing glow upon a young man lying cradled in a thick bed of damp straw. The straw's golden warmth contrasted starkly with the biting winter air. Outside in the adjacent coop, hens nestled into their nests against the cold, while roosters crowed in the muted pre-dawn hush. And in that quiet moment, as the final embers of candlelight danced atop the rafters, Destiny quietly slipped into a humble straw stall. His name was Luan, a 19-year-old whose skin was weathered by seasons working the fields and whose deep blue eyes had once danced with life. Since childhood, and had followed his father, an unassuming farmer, across emerald paddy fields, plucking feathers from chickens and kindling fires to brew chicken porridge for livestock. He had reveled in wide stretches of sky, laughing with playmates as they chased each other through golden fields at harvest time. Yet that morning, an unexpected fever had struck in the dead of night. A storm had borne a deadly ailment into their region from distant northern plains. The disease spread quickly, first to the cattle, then the villagers. And though young and robust, had collapsed under its weight. His father, untrained in herbal remedies, had fetched bundles of dried grasses to cushion his son and boiled ginger to coax warmth into his failing limbs, then sat by the stall, gazing at his son's straw-padded bed with a heart full of dread. Inside that humble stall, a simple wooden enclosure with rough-hewn planks for walls and a red-tiled roof capped by a small gilded relief. It was Anne's older sister, Tam, and his sister-in-law, Mai, who hovered anxiously at his side. Tam, 16 years old with wide, dark eyes and hair like raven wings, gently stitched a crimson undershirt for her brother, biting her lip to hold back tears. Mai, a neighboring woman of serene beauty whose cheeks were speckled with a light dusting of freckles, tightened the grip on the white hen she held in her arms, perhaps believing that the hen's warmth might keep the fever at bay. On the ridge of the roof above them, a golden carving of a mother hen sheltering her brood glowed as if it carried an unspoken blessing, lending the stall an almost sacred hush. Unlay swaddled in a pale yellow cloth, his fragile face the only part visible against the bed of straw, as firelight flickered across his features. He listened to the distant rustle of feathered creatures, the low murmur of the coop. Beside him, Tam whispered, Stay with us a little longer. I found fresh gotu kola leaves. Mom will boil them into a tonic. Your fever will break soon, I promise." And nodded weakly, too fever-stricken to offer more than a faint smile. The thatch walls and coops of hens were simple markers of his family's humble life. Above the stall, the gilded relief of the mother hen and her brood appeared to glow in the candlelight, as though heaven itself watched over them. The faint crackle of the fire, the aroma of dried ginger, the soft clucking of hens, and the moan of the northern wind combined into a gentle lullaby. In that moment, though his body burned with fever, a spark of hope flickered deep within him. His name was Lewin. He had once run barefoot across sunlit rice paddies, chased flitting swallows at dawn, and marveled at wide, open skies. Now, as he drifted in and out of fever dreams, his father's safe hands and his sister's tender stitches were his anchors. Perhaps, in the depths of his delirium, and sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. Something that would alter the fate of his entire village. Chapter 2, Memories of Home. And stirred as if waking from a long journey. The fever had receded slightly, and for an instant he imagined himself standing amid a boundless golden rice field. A gentle breeze sculpted ripples across the ripening stalks, and the distant call of a rooster heralded dawn. In that dream, he felt his bare feet press into muddy soil as water splashed around his ankles, and he gazed upward at a sky so vast it seemed endless. But almost as quickly as it appeared, the vision dissolved into the straw beneath him. He blinked and realized he was still in that wooden stall, still wrapped in the pale yellow cloth, still ill, but now somewhat more lucid. By his side, Tam adjusted his sash, smoothing out folds of cloth. She whispered, "And are you awake?" The rooster crowed twice. "Day is breaking. Drink this ginger brew. It'll help break the fever." He tried to lift his head to look at her, but only managed a faint nod. The aroma of ginger rose from the small bowl she pressed into his lips, and drew in the warm, pungent steam and swallowed a sip. It slid through his throat, kindling something like warmth in his veins. Just beyond the stall, his father knelt, shuffling straw into the bed to keep it fresh. The coop's hen shifted restlessly, as if sensing his awakening, and heard the low rumble of his father's voice, just a soft murmur, pleading for his son's quick recovery, and sank back into the straw, feeling a current of relief and gratitude wash over him. Tam dabbed a cool cloth to his brow. "You scared us all," and she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I think you'll be well soon," and managed a weak smile. Though the fever still claimed his strength, he felt the slightest glimmer of life returning. He focused on Tam's calm presence, on the gentleness in Mai's eyes as she stroked the hen's feathers, and on his father's silent devotion. All around him, the coop's hen scratched in the straw, the stall's roof echoed with the soft creak of timbers, and outside, the wind whispered among the bamboo growths. "And wants to get up," he croaked at last, his voice raspy from fever. "I want to stand outside, breathe fresh air." Tam glanced at Mai, then gently propped his shoulders. "Let me help you sit, but you must rest before you wander too far." Mai struck a match at the corner of the wooden lantern on the wall. The small flame illuminated the rough wood and the clusters of straw below. She offered him the crimson undershirt, which Tam had sewn. "Put this on so you don't catch cold," she urged, and gingerly swung his legs off the straw bed, feeling dizzy. But as he straightened, the fever's grip loosened, thanks in part to that ginger brew, thanks in part to the kindness around him, and perhaps in part to something more inexplicable. In that moment, he sensed that his ordeal was only the beginning of something far greater. Chapter 3. The Rooster's Cry and Fear's Arrival. By the time it steadied himself, the sun had fully risen, and pale morning light filtered through the barn's open doorway. The hen scattered at his feet, clucking in greeting. Tam and Mai led him outside, where his father waited just beyond the coop. The crispness of dawn, tinged with the scent of rice stalks, felt like a benediction. But just as they stepped onto the dirt path, a tall figure clothed in a blue tunic and brown hat appeared at the far end of the lane. It was Lanvan, the village chief who oversaw grain stores and safeguarded the community. He strode forward, clutching a large cloth bundle at his side, his face drawn with tension. "Brother Tran," Lanvan greeted his father. "I bring troubling news. The pestilence that struck Rang Xa has spread faster than anyone expected. They've already buried 30 households there. People are fleeing in panic. We must reinforce the levee and prepare rice supplies. If the disease crosses this river, it will reach our own families." His father's face turned grave. "Has it already reached Rang Xa? That's just across the river. I thought we were safe." Lanvan shook his head. "Some say it's not a typical contagion. Whomever it touches withers in a single night. They've been burying entire families alive. That's why I came early to warn you. We need to strengthen our defenses." His mother, who had joined them, gasped in fear. "But I cannot abandon my son. He's just growing stronger from his fever. I bedded him on straw to keep him warm. I cannot bear to see him leave." Lanvan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You must protect him here. He's still too weak to travel. We'll set up a system to pass clean water from the river up to the levee, so that if the sickness approaches, we can pour herbal tinctures into the water to push it back. We're fortunate that it survived. His recovery is a miracle. He must stay here." Tam lowered her gaze and spoke softly. "Chief, I will care for my brother. You have our word. If anything happens, we'll rely on the neighbors for help." Lanvan nodded, though his face remained clouded with worry. "I understand. Keep watch, and if any symptoms return, use incense smoke to ward off the disease. That is the old remedy we have for plague." With that, Lanvan turned and walked off, leaving the family standing at the edge of their yard. His mother hugged him fiercely, her heart pounding. "Son, you must stay strong. We cannot let the sickness return," and nodded. Inside, he felt determined. Though his body had been ravaged by fever, his spirit burned with a stubborn warmth. He vowed that no matter how fierce the plague became, he would stand firm. Chapter 4. A Community United by Hope. Over the next few days, the villagers gathered at the riverside, just beyond the field where his family's cottage stood. The river flowed gently, its surface a ribbon of blue-green light. People formed a long human chain, passing wooden buckets from one to the next. From the riverbank up to the levee on the hillside, each bucket, full of fresh water, was swiftly relayed along the line. The goal was to have a ready supply of water to pour down atop the levee as a barricade of liquid, mixed with herbal decoctions to keep the pestilence from crossing over. From time to time, one of the men at the water's edge would raise his arms and call out, "Hurry! Let no bucket touch the ground. Pass it quickly." Then the bucket would arc through the air to the next person, who would catch it with practiced ease. Soon it reached the top of the levee, where the captain of the watch and a handful of volunteers mixed in bundles of dried mugwort and ginger, splashing the healing brew across the muddy embankment. Amid this rhythmic clatter, buckets colliding, water sloshing, calls of left foot, right foot, and watched from the safety of his home. He remained unsteady on his feet, shivering from weakness, but his heart surged with pride to see every man, woman, and child pulling together. Even the small children, barefoot and wide-eyed, took turns passing the buckets. Roosters crowed in the nearby barns as if heralding their collective effort. Tam hovered by the door of the stall, throat tight with emotion. "Brother, look how everyone's helping," she whispered, and nodded, voice hoarse. "They're protecting the village, just like we prayed. It feels like our hearts are one." Mai, who had returned from gathering more medicinal herbs, knelt beside it. "Drink this tonic," she urged, handing him a steaming bowl of boiled ginger and dandelion. "It will give you strength." And sip the hot liquid. The zing of ginger cut through his foggy mind, and for the first time in days, he felt warmth radiate from his chest. He watched as his neighbors passed cycle after cycle of water, their faces lit with determination. In that moment, he understood that the village's salvation did not come from one person alone, but from every individual's willingness to unite. Lonvan, the village chief, strode along the levee, directing each shift at the watch post. As he passed, he cupped his hands to his ears. "Your survival gave us hope. When I saw you begin to recover, I realized we might have a chance. Keep listening to your heart, my friend," and felt a surge of gratitude course through him. He lifted his voice and called out to the workforce. "Everyone, remember this night. We will conquer the darkness together." From the water bearers to the forge-wielding blacksmiths, from the weavers with their tiny thimbles to the elders chanting prayers by straw braziers, every villager responded with shouts of encouragement. "Together we stand. Together we prevail." That evening, as the sky darkened and stars flickered above, the levee was fortified. A final layer of water infused with fragrant herbs glistened under torchlight. Safe for the moment, and returned to the straw stall, where Tam and Mai waited with steaming broth. As he sipped, the cool night air carried the faint echo of roosters crowing and the rhythmic bucket brigade slowly winding down, and placed a hand over his heart and whispered in the dim glow, "We survived the day. We will survive tomorrow too." Chapter 5, The Legend of the Striped Garment. Though his strength continued to return and remained preoccupied by a single question, why had he been the one to survive? What had protected him when so many others had perished? Each time he looked at the pale yellow cloth wrapped around him, he thought about the pastel-striped tunic he wore during his fevered dreams, a garment woven with alternating pink and light blue threads. Those dream visions persisted. He would stand beneath roosters' cries in sunlit rice fields, that striped tunic billowing in a silent wind. Each time, he felt as though that piece of cloth was infused with a power beyond ordinary fabric. One early morning, Lonvan returned to his stall, still wearing his weathered blue tunic and well-worn hat. He held in his hands a set of tattered documents, the village's archival records. These parchments belonged to the old weaving cooperative once based in Rang Xa, Lonvan explained. Before the Great Plague that decimated Rang Xa years ago, there was a master weaver who was said to worship the roosters that guarded the barnyard. Legend said his cloth held a fragment of royal thread imbued with protective blessings so potent that a single stripe of it could ward off disease. When the plague first arrived, cursed fate caught him unprepared. He took one bolt of cloth and fled into the mountains, never to be seen again. He unrolled the brittle parchment, revealing intricate calligraphy and faded ink illustrations of roosters standing sentinel over bales of rice straw. "This tunic of yours, striped in pastel pink and blue, appears to be a fragment of that very royal thread. Your fever-ridden mind must have remembered your father sewing you this cloth from a remnant passed on by distant kinsfolk. That cloth is more than just a keepsake. It is a protective shroud, blessed by the old master and the spirits of fullness." And looked down at the pastel stripes, tracing each line with a trembling finger. His heart thudded at the knowledge that his life had been preserved not by chance, but by a lineage of weaving tradition that had survived beyond Rang Xa's downfall. "That's astounding," and muttered. "But how did my father come by that cloth?" Lonvan closed the scroll. "Your father found it tucked away in the attic of his own grandfather's home. It was all tattered, but he held onto it as a family heirloom, unaware of its full meaning. When he sewed those stripes for you, it became part of your destiny. That's why, when you lay there in the straw, you awakened with the strength to resist death's knell," and felt tears well in his eyes, a mix of relief and awe. He pressed the cloth to his chest as though it were the most precious treasure. "I will never take this tunic for granted again," he vowed. Lonvan's gaze softened. "Neither should you, but do not rely on it alone." The villagers, working together, created a shield of water, incense, and herbal remedies that kept the plague at bay. The cloth gave you a head start, but the whole community's spirit sealed our safety and stood, resolute. From now on, I will dedicate myself to both preserving the weaving tradition and to ensuring the well-being of everyone here. Chapter 6. A Pilgrimage to Rang Xas Abandoned Halls. With his constitution fully restored, an Lan Van resolved to revisit Rang Xa, a place once prosperous with looms and dye vats, now lying desolate after the plague. They prepared a small cart loaded with rice and herbal supplies to share with any survivors they might find, along with carefully folded cloth embroidered with pastel stripes as a gift of goodwill. They traveled along the winding riverside roads at dawn, with the cart's wooden wheels clattering on mossy stones. The air was crisp, enlivened by birdsong and the spicy tang of fresh bamboo shoots. The memory of his earlier fevered dreams flickered in N's mind each time he glimpsed a rooster's silhouette against the breaking dawn. By mid-morning, they reached Rang Xas outskirts. A rusted gate, half-caved, creaked as they passed under it. Once, this gate had welcomed merchants and travelers. Now its hinges hung askew. They followed the cracked flagstone path leading to a collapsed barn with a half-intact red tile roof. The golden rooster relief that once crowned the ridge had fallen, leaving only a battered stump of gilded metal. From somewhere within the ruins drifted the faint echo of crows cawing overhead. Lan Van narrowed his eyes. This used to be the center of weaving. Thy pots would sit along that wall. We need to find the old sanctum of the master weaver. Some say it's beneath the central hall, but no one dares explore it. Cautiously, the two crept deeper, stepping around broken timbers and shattered pottery. Dust motes danced in beams of sunlight filtering through holes in the roof. Vines and ferns claimed each surface, their roots creeping between flagstones. In the center of what had once been a grand courtyard, a single weaving loom lay half covered in dust, its shuttle rotted away. Next to it, a faded mural depicted a master weaver sitting cross-legged among glowing roosters, holding a bolt of striped cloth in his lap. The pastel pink and blue threads once bright had faded to ghostly pastel gray, but the pattern was unmistakable. N approached the mural, heart pounding. He gently laid a hand against the image of the master weaver. This was him, he breathed, the one who blessed the cloth. Lan Van looked around uneasily. Legend says an illness overtook him within that very hall. Many of the villagers perished here. Some claim his spirit still walks these halls, guarding the secrets of his craft. And steeled himself, remembering the rituals he had undergone, the 7 sacred rites. He knelt before the remains of the loom and closed his eyes. Folding his hands in prayer, he recited the old invocation from memory. By rooster's vigilance and straw's embrace, bestow your blessing, hold me in grace. A gust of wind stirred through the shattered windows, causing the ivy to clap softly against the wall, and felt a warm, humming current at his fingertips. He opened his eyes to see faint, swirling motes of golden dust gathering above the loom. The dust glowed for a heartbeat, then vanished as the rafters moaned. Lan Van laid a reassuring hand on its shoulder. He has recognized you. The master weaver's spirit welcomes you. Together, they descended a narrow stairway hidden behind a collapsed stone slab. The air grew clammy, tinged with a sweet, moldy scent. In the dim glow of Lan Van's lantern, and saw a small crypt beneath the hall, a stone pedestal etched with rooster and barley motifs. At its center lay a rusted chest, sealed by a wrought iron lock. Within that chest lies the Codex of Textiles, Lan Van whispered. Legends say it contains formulas for dye, weaving patterns, and prayers of protection. If we can restore its contents, we might help villages far beyond ours. Anne's pulse quickened, but the lock is rusted shut. How do we open it? Lan Van produced a slender iron key that had once belonged to Rang Xas village treasurer. This key was passed down to me by my grandfather. He survived the plague and vowed to preserve these secrets for someone worthy. With a trembling hand, Lan Van slid the key into the lock. It turned with a grinding click. The lid creaked open, revealing a single scroll of parchment bound in leather, embossed with pastel stripes barely visible through grime. Carefully, N unrolled it. The Codex's pages contain detailed diagrams of weaving looms, step-by-step instructions for combining pastel pink and blue threads in precise patterns, as well as prayers to be woven into each bolt for protection. Marginal notes in a delicate hand read, "Wear this for your neighbor. Let this cloth guard your village." May the roosters guide your heart." An's voice shook as he read. By crafting this cloth, one bonds body and spirit to the living rooster's vigilance, straw's embrace. The plague finds no purchase. Lanvin watched tears form in An's eyes. Now we understand. The master weaver wove his faith into every thread, binding healing into the fabric itself. That tunic you wore, and it contained those prayers, those diagrams, those lines of power, and folded the scroll carefully, placing it in his chest. We must bring these instructions back to Tan Hoa, replicate the pattern, and distribute the cloth to neighboring villages. Lan Van nodded. At dawn, we depart. Today, we'll rest in the old caretaker's cottage, then begin our return journey. As they rose from the crypt, the rustle of ghostly roosters echoed in the silence, like a final benediction from a departed master. Chapter 7. Return to Tan Hoa. At first light, An and Lan Van retraced their steps across the misty fields toward their home village. The codex, wrapped in oiled cloth, secured under An's arm, was the promise of a new dawn for the region. The countryside was hushed, aside from the soft coo of doves in the steeple of a distant chapel and the faint chirp of sparrows at the weaving cottage they passed. Back at the riverside levee, villagers were already lining up again, but not to pass buckets this time. Instead, they gathered around simple cotton frames and dye vats, and unrolled the codex on a wooden crate, passing out freshly woven skeins of pastel threads in pink and blue. The village's new apprentice weavers, eager youth who had never dared venture into weaving before, inhaled sharply at the sight of these precious, sacred threads. Tam and I stood nearby, offering herbal tea to anyone who came for a closer look. Several neighbors wove squares of cloth, following An's instructions. Weave one pastel stripe of pink, then two of blue, repeating. Each stripe must be 5 finger breadths wide. Keep your heart calm. Let the roosters in your mind watch over the warp. Little by little, pastel cloth began to bloom across wooden looms. Bolts of pastel herringbone pattern, pastel pinstripe pattern, pastel crosshatch pattern. The air was thick with the tang of dye, crushed indigo for blue, crushed madder root for pink. As each piece of cloth emerged damp, villagers laid them to dry on bamboo racks facing the sun, and walked along the line, encouraging each weaver, hold the thread wholeheartedly. Let your prayers infuse it. This is more than fabric. This is hope woven into every fiber. When the first bolts of cloth dried to a soft pastel glow, and gathered them and beckoned the villagers to form another human chain, this time passing bundles of viewing cloth instead of buckets of water, they distributed the protective cloth across 4 neighboring villages. Vong Lai Lan, Tui Sun, Sunjia, and ultimately back to Rang Exe. Wherever the pastel cloth was draped over door frames, hung in doorways, or stitched into garments, the villagers reported feeling a sudden calm in their hearts, as if a watchful hen had taken flight above them, glimmering in golden light. As night fell, not a single new case of disease arose in any of the villages that wore the pastel cloth. Word of this miracle spread like wildfire throughout the region. Back in Tan Hoa, at the square before the old barn, the entire village held a festival at dusk. Bamboo torches cast a flickering glow on the throng, and stood on a simple raised platform, wearing his cherished pastel-striped tunic. The codex sat on a small wooden altar behind him. He addressed the gathered crowd. My friends, today we celebrate not only the end of disease, but the power of unity and faith. When our neighbors in Rang Exe fell into despair, this cloth, woven with the Master's prayers, gave us a path forward. Let its pastel stripes remind us that even in the harshest winter, we can weave hope and protection through our communities. I am grateful to share this blessing with every household here. As his words settled over the crowd, the villagers cheered and lit more torches, pressing pastel cloths to their hearts in solemn gratitude. Overhead, roosters crowed from coops nearby in a chorus as if paying homage to An and the Master Weaver's legacy. Tam and I stood at his side, faces bright with pride. Their mother wiped tears from her cheeks as she handed out steaming bowls of chicken porridge to anyone still hungry. An's father, with a gentle smile, patted his son's shoulder. You have honored our family's humble roots, he said. Your courage carried the flame of hope through our darkest days. An's gratitude swelled. Beneath the glow of torchlight, he bowed deeply in front of the altar. To every sister and brother who passed a basket of water, every mother and father who donated herbs, and every child who held a pastel thread, you are the true guardians of our village. May we never forget this bond. Chapter 8. A New Dawn for the Weavers. In the weeks that followed, the so-called Pastel Weaving Guild sprang to life in Tanhoa and neighboring hamlets. Villagers who had never touched a loom formed apprentice groups. Elder weavers, some who had fled Rang Exe, returned to teach the ancient craft, weaving protective patterns into every garment they created, and served as guild master, his role less a position of power than a guardian of knowledge. He ensured that all families received a modest supply of pastel cloth so that no household would remain unprotected. One sunny morning, a group of school children, aged 7 to 12, gathered at the guild hall, an open-air pavilion draped in pastel banners, and stood patiently as each child placed a single straw of pastel thread into their spindle for spinning. A boy named Min turned to him with wide eyes. "Surin, do you think the pastel stripes will protect me if I get sick?" and smiled and knelt to Min's level. "These stripes carry the prayers of our ancestors, the faith of our neighbors, and the courage of farmers who shared water along a levee. Yes, they will protect you, as long as you remember to weave your own hope into them." The boy nodded solemnly and returned to his spinning wheel. All around them, children wove bolts of pastel fabric that fluttered in the spring breeze. The guild hall soon brimmed with bolts of cloth in pastel pink and blue patterns, each piece a living testament to the community's faith and resilience. Tam, who had become the guild's head scribe, recorded every pattern and prayer verse in a new illuminated codex. She sketched roosters, ripe straw sheaves, and stylized rice grains in gold leaf margins, ensuring that future generations would benefit from this knowledge. My now respected herbalist opened a small apothecary at the edge of the guild hall. She specialized in potions and salves made from the region's medicinal plants, ginger, dandelion, mugwort. And from that day forward, she began stitching tiny pastel symbols into each jar's label, symbolizing protection. And's mother tended her own modest weaving loom in the corner of the family's modest home, weaving pastel cloth into strips that she then sold at the market for a handful of coins. These coins, traded for rice and salt, helped fund the guild's expansion. She would often pause in her weaving, gaze out at the sunrise, and say a silent prayer of thanks for her son's safe return from fever. And's father joined the guild as its first apprentice blacksmith. Though he had always worked the fields, he now hammered simple loom parts, shuttles, heddles, and heddle rods from wrought iron. His steady, rhythmic hammering rang through the courtyard as he forged each piece, knowing that each iron rod he crafted would help someone's weaving stand strong through many seasons. Between the walls of the guild hall, and prepared lesson plans for aspiring weavers. Each evening, as the sky turned tangerine, he would gather everyone for a demonstration: how to weave the standard pastel striped pattern, how to adjust tension on the warp threads, how to mix crushed indigo and madder root dyes to achieve the perfect pastel hues. His voice would rise and fall in gentle cadences. Place one pink thread, then two blue threads. Adjust your shuttle so that it oscillates smoothly. Keep your wrist relaxed and imagine the rooster's call guiding your hand. Let your breath follow the rhythm of your loom. So did the Pastel Weaving Guild thrive. Soon, pillows and shawls woven in pastel patterns began to appear along the dusty paths of other villages. Travelers who once feared leaving their homes now wore pastel-dyed scarves as talismans. Parents tucked pastel patches into their children's collars as they headed off to school. The memory of the plague lingered, but the threat seemed to recede whenever villagers wove or touched those pastel threads.